Philadelphia. I'm Bruce Buffer. It's time for the Anthony Gorgano Show.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy NFC Championship Thursday to all across the Delaware Valley. This is the Anthony Gargano Show. We're presented by Rite Aid. You got to go to riteaid.com to find this nearest store and pharmacy to you. Oh, now we're just a matter of hours away from the game. It's Thursday, and this is when I start to get nervous. Like these big monster games. That's it, VG. Just pull that mic over. These big monster games. They just make you nervous, right? Like they give you such great angst. And it was funny, and I hear, and God bless the new generation of Eagles fans that are like, what are you worried about? Like, why do you don't have that Philadelphia thing? I can't help it, right? Like it's like a part of me. It's so hard to shake. If you didn't live through 2002 and the NFC Championship game against Tampa Bay, you can't understand it, right? It's so hard to get over that thing. Like, I look at the game on Sunday, of course, right? Like, Eagles are a healthy favorite. We were at Parks last night. They're a 6-point favorite. They're probably going to go up to 6.5, maybe 7. Who knows, right? By kickoff. But, like, 6-point favorite is a healthy favorite. There's something about it, though, man. There's something about the angst of a big game. So coming up today, we got a fun show for you. We're going to have Dan Orlovsky, the OC of ESPN, on. We're going to talk to Joe Banner, whose imprint is all over this championship Sunday between Andy, Sean McDermott, and, of course, Howie and the Eagles. So we're going to talk to Joe. We got Baldy coming up 10:30. So a heavy football show, obviously. But I was talking to Dan, and Dan's wife, Dan Orlovsky's wife, is she's from the area, huge Eagles fan, like a huge Eagles fan. And Danny asked her, you want to go to the game on Sunday? And she said, no, because if I go, they're going to lose. And apparently they went to the Washington game, they lost. They went to a couple Phillies playoff games, and they lost. And so she's like maniacal, like a true Philadelphia sports fan going, nah, man, if I go to that game, they're going to lose. He was telling a great story. You'll hear it when they're watching the game. If things aren't going right, and she has the kids change jerseys, and, like that's kind of like that superstition and that thing. Like we really feel like we almost have a say in the outcome. Now, obviously, it's delusional. Right? Whatever happens, happens. There's no such thing as bad luck. It's funny. We had Angelo on yesterday because we wanted Ange to answer for his 5-win prediction. Right? Now, here they are in the NFC Championship game. So Ange goes, yeah, they're going to win. And right away, everybody's like, no, don't pick them to win. Right? I mean, like all that stuff. Who's a mush? Who's that? And in reality, we all know intellectually that it has no bearing on the outcome. But all this stuff is real. It's part of how we consume Eagles, football, big games, or sports in general, and any kind of big game. And, look, I X and O it a million times. It's kind of the way I stay sane. And I like to go into the X's and O's, and I like to look at it from a true, like, analytical football standpoint. I think partly because it makes me not focus on the, what's going to happen. Like if you kind of talk about it from a logical standpoint, it takes the mystery out of it a little bit. And I want that because left up to the universe, I mean, I'll tell you straight up, Sunday, after the safety, I thought they were going to lose. I did. And right away, my cousin and I, who we share a brain, right away he texted me the script. And it was in the back of my mind that Los Angeles ravaged by the fires. The Rams lost their first playoff game, home game, got displaced, moved to Arizona. And how about that story, right? They're all wearing the LAFD, right, with the Rams logo and the Nike swoosh. And how about that story, right? That story was going to be front and center. Look at the Rams overcoming like the Saints, Katrina, the whole thing. And all I kept thinking about is like when that safety happens, oh my God. And then even down to when Stafford hits Nakua, I'm going, the script, it's there. It's there. And it's always in the back of your mind because setting the stage for 2002, remember, in 2001, the Eagles, man, they gave the Rams, the greatest show on turf team, everything they had. I mean, they were winning at halftime. It was so close to an upset. So we're coming off of that, and the mantra was 52 yards from the Super Bowl. The Eagles' last possession ended at their own 48-yard line. And so the mantra the next year was, we're 52 yards from the Super Bowl. Remember, it had been since 1980 since they went to a Super Bowl, right? So all those years. So now 2002 comes in. It's the last year of Veterans Stadium. And we're all looking at it, right? And they're a good team, man. Like, they were a really, really good team. And they're rolling through the regular season. Donovan gets hurt. He breaks the ankle and throws 4 touchdown passes on the ankle, right? And, oh, my God, they win. They were still winning. And you go, all right, well, they beat Minnesota, I think it was, in the first round. And then it's the NFC Championship game. They're a favorite. All this talk about the Buccaneers not winning in cold weather. Like, they were winless in under 32 degrees. And, man, it was the last game of the vet. It was freezing cold the whole time. I mean, it was like one of those things where it was going to be, without a doubt, the game starts with a B. Mitch return, right? Brian Mitchell takes it back. Deuce goes in from 22. Boom, touchdown. Eagles up 7-0. They get a pick. It's 10-0. And I don't know. To this day, I still don't even understand how they lost the game. And then the Carolina comes and follows, right? The Super Bowl where Belichick is cheating in the second half. They should have won the Super Bowl in 04. Then 08, all right, well, this is going to be our year. All Pennsylvania Super Bowl against the Steelers, they lose. So even though they win this Super Bowl, and Nick Foles is like St. Nick and the miracle on Broad Street, we still have that pang, right? If you're of a certain age, you still have that pang of like angst. There's something about what transpired. Like, I'm looking at the game Sunday, I'm going, I mean, you kidding me? We should be elated that it's Washington. I should be elated. Like, you don't have to go to Detroit. Even though I think the Eagles would beat Detroit or could beat Detroit, we all have to admit, like, it's at home. It's against a division rival that you're better than. Other than Daniels, like, who are you really afraid of? I mean, Terry McLaurin's good, but let's face it, right? Eagles are a much better team. So that's why they're a healthy favorite. But there's still a part of you that still worries and has the angst and is like, oh, my God. So today's an oh, my God. Good morning, VG.
What's up, brother? I feel like you're missing a good one that was pivotal in our age. Raiders, backup quarterback, Jim Plunkett, right?
So
completes 13 stinking passes and wins the Super Bowl MVP as they defeat the Birds. Backup QB.
And they were a favorite. Eagles were a favorite in the game.
Of course. That's why we're scared.
What was we were kids. What was there was a holding penalty. There was a touchdown pass called back because of holding. And that was New Orleans. Remember?
Oh, it was in New Orleans.
The Super Bowl that year was in New Orleans.
Because Vermeil was all weird.
Yes. So the Raiders, like, this is back in the old, this is prehistoric football, right? So the week before, leading up to the game, the Raiders are out marauding. Right?
Right.
Like,
They're doing what Raiders do.
Partying, right? Like, they're doing their thing. And Vermeil had them locked away.
Yeah, they weren't allowed, like, early
curfew.
Yeah.
Right? No, don't go near me. Meanwhile, the Raiders were on Bourbon Street, smoking, drinking, right? Hurricanes, who knows?
Right.
And somehow they freaking lost the game.
Mm-hmm.
I looked it up. So Jaws threw a 40-yard touchdown pass to Rodney Parker on a 3rd and 10 that was nullified because of an illegal motion by Carmichael.
Rodney Parker.
It would have tied the game.
Yeah.
Wow.
Rodney Parker. Wow. Yeah. No, you're right, VG. So when I look at Sunday, obviously Eagles are a healthy favorite. A 6-point favorite and a championship game is a big number.
Yeah. And you got little Delhomme and Jervicius ghosts swimming around your head.
I do.
Anthony.
I know.
Look out, Anthony.
Delhomme.
You didn't believe in us.
I know. Mushan Muhammad. Like,
Rondé Barber.
And I scream yelling at them, right? Get off my, get away. Come on. Like, do you have it?
I usually do. I am the man who has tremendous anxiety, but
You have everyday anxiety.
Yeah, I feel really good right now. I don't have any of this. This is a different team, man. This is a team built to win this time of year. Those other teams all had flaws, I feel like. Right now, this is great defense, great running game. They're made for this. They're made to overcome a terrible game by their quarterback. This is the team, I think. I'm not saying
No,
I don't want to go
right.
overboard and jinx it, but I feel pretty good.
You just used the word jinx. Like, you don't want to overboard and jinx it.
Well, yeah.
Like, in fairness, like, what, like, are we insane? Like, anything we say
technically, yes,
that does no bearing on the game itself.
Yeah, but I mean, I think all of us. I am in
Like,
therapy for.
I'm
in therapy for OCD thoughts. I think all of Philadelphia has a base layer of mild OCD where they think their thoughts and actions can control the universe.
Well,
It's true.
I mean,
there is collective energy
You're
that
right.
does things.
There is
yeah.
such a thing called collective energy. It's a truism, right? And there's such a thing as sports karma, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I truly believe.
Now you got me bugging out.
Like, I truly believe that the Super Bowl, the Nick Foles Super Bowl, was a gift.
Yeah. All right.
I think it was a gift from the football gods. It was
because we earned it or we deserved it.
We deserved it. After all these years of being so close, I think it was a gift. So there's
Was it a
cleansing?
Is it a one-time gift or a cleansing of the energy season?
I don't know. Like, I started to think about this. This is how twisted I am. But I started thinking about Washington, right? So forget Josh Harris for a second. But Dan Snyder was, you want to talk about karma. I mean, that dude was dastardly, right? Like, that dude was no good. Like, they had bad karma around them.
Yes.
And now he left. And, like, there's Daniels comes. I hate to say it. I love the coach. I like Dan Quinn a lot. Right?
They don't deserve it. They're not ready yet.
They don't deserve
it. They're like us a few years before the Super Bowl.
I'm with you. Intellectually, I'm with you. But I start thinking, well, does that mean karma's on their side?
No, can't be on their side yet.
I don't think
They've only changed the name a few years ago. They got to build up some stuff for the karma.
I know. I feel you, man. I do. I feel you. But in my mind, this is the tricks that your mind plays.
No, the angst that little community of Washington, D.C. causes all of America. And I know most of them are transient people and they're not Commanders fans, but the angst that community causes the rest of us does not deserve good karma. They do not deserve any kinds of parades down there for anything sports related.
I remember the narrative when we won the Super Bowl back in 2017 that everybody calling into the radio, hearing them walking around town, they're all like, if we get this Super Bowl, I don't care if we win for the next 10 years.
Yeah, for the record, I was not on board with that.
I wasn't on board with that too, but did that clip our wings?
No.
Are we living still in that karma of
I
saying
know. That's a great point. I don't know. You're right. Listen, I don't know.
Do we need to shake that 10-year karma?
I didn't like that. First of all, I want to be in it every year.
Yeah, same.
I enjoy these January runs.
Yeah.
All right?
I don't want to be like the Sixers right now for 10 years.
Oh, my God, please. Right? Like, no, seriously. But we're all superstitious. I mean, every one of us has that superstition in our blood. I don't believe anybody goes, I'm calm, Like, we all say it. Like, we overdo it. You know when people overdo something because they have, like, fears?
Yeah, the overly braggadocious person. Yeah.
Right? Like, that's who we are.
Worse than a crisis or whatever.
Right?
It's
Like,
just crimple up.
Like, that's what we are.
We are, but this team is strong.
Yes.
And they're built for this.
No, intellectually, I agree. Intellectually, they're going to win the game.
Nick State
Like, if
or
you
come
ask
on.
me,
Saquon deserves it.
do
As a
I
football
feel-
god, Saquon deserves one.
Agreed. You ask me, do I think they're going to win the game? I say yes. Right? They're a better team, and they play a brand of football that wins.
But yeah, I'm super confident going into this. However, I think I'm not alone in this. If the first quarter's not great,
Oh, dude,
I'll change something
No,
up. I might
mean-
change where I'm
Right,
sitting,
right.
what the beers I'm drinking.
You sound like my father.
Yeah, I mean, you
My,
gotta
my
look at the-
father literally
What-
wears the same
What's Mr.
outfit.
Frazier do?
Mr. Frazier he has a black Deshaun Jackson jersey that he wears every Sunday. He wears the same shoes, the same socks, the same pants.
It's a good
sits in
man.
the same chair every Sunday because that is how superstitious he is.
It's a good man right there, buddy.
Yeah, he's not alone.
That's
not
a good
alone
man.
at all. That's
Yeah.
probably a third of the Eagles community at least.
Yes.
I mean, I know at the during the playoff runs at my local bars, if there's regulars who sit in certain seats and they've been on a heater, those seats are reserved. Like, we need these seats for these people because that's the way the mojo's going.
Listen,
I think
I'm
that
all
happens
about
throughout the
that.
city.
I'm all about
Yeah,
making
man.
sure the universe is happy.
Need your charms and
You all
baubles.
right? The universe, all right? Everybody all right? Like, we
Right.
good? Can we get this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe in that. Jamil, you believe in that? It's my man Jamil's there watching the show, hanging out. All right. Couple things. We got to take care of some business. Coming up, the locker room report with Bo Wulf. We'll get into everything with Bo coming up. Dan Orlovsky after that. Joe Banner at 10. Baldy at 10:30. So looking forward to it. Let's talk about Golden Nugget Jewelers. Yes, Golden Nugget Jewelers. Look, you got a loved one, right? You got a girl. You got all kinds of things. Birthday, anniversary, holidays. You got Valentine's Day coming up.
Just to be a nice person.
Yeah.
Just a random
you love
gift.
her, right?
Just
You
a
wanna
random
love her.
gift.
Yeah,
Yeah. Nothing wrong with
So
that.
when Valentine's Day come up, you want to make sure, especially Eagles run. I don't know. Chances are she's a big Eagles fan, but whatever. Treat her well. Diamond earrings, diamond pendants. Golden Nugget Jewelers has everything. All right, everything for the man in a relationship is you're hooked up right there at Golden Nugget Jewelers. All right, go see my man Yaron. And if you are thinking about popping the question, largest selection of certified diamonds. They have all the settings, the designers like Decore and Viraggio. He'll hook it up, man. He'll get together a ring that will work within your budget and that will just make her melt. Go to Golden Nugget Jewelers right in the heart of Jewelers Row, Center City, 8th and Chestnut. GoldenNuggetJewelers.com. Golden Nugget Jewelers, where Philly gets engaged.
All right. If you've got kids out there, you want them to become adults who, they can handle their money, be responsible. So TrueMark Financial Credit Union, they got something you should be interested in. Teaching kids is like teaching financial. So TrueMark has the ultimate playbook for teaching financial responsibility. It's their free Greenlight account. This Greenlight app is totally changing the game. It's helping kids and teens learn how to earn, save, and spend wisely. You can track their savings. You can set up spending allowances. You can pay their allowance all through the Greenlight app. And here's the cool part. Each kid gets their own debit card, so they can make purchases, learn real-world money skills while you stay in control from your phone. You get peace of mind, and they get the freedom to make smart decisions with their money. It's like coaching your kid through their very own financial game. And for TrueMark Financial members, this is totally free. Now is the perfect time to introduce your kids to this Greenlight program. Get signed up today. Visit TrueMark.com/Greenlight for more information on this cool program.
I love it. I know Kelly's probably feeling the same way. Kelly Body is the CEO at TrueMark.
I think she's superstitious.
Yeah, she was screaming and yelling for the first 4 weeks. Oh my God, leadership! Come on, Nick. So I thought I was working with you.
All greened out, probably.
Yeah, she loves it. Everybody does. I mean, that's the beauty of it, this whole thing. All right, let's go from the All PHLY Eagles Show. Our locker room report brought to us by Valley Forge Tourism. Get to know Valley Forge and Montco. All right, here he is, our man, Bo Wulf. Good morning, Bo. How are you?
Good morning. How we doing?
Yeah, we don't hear him. We got him, Bo?
Hear me now?
Yeah, we got you now. All right. Let me ask you a question. Do you fall into the any you don't seem like the kind of guy that has any angst. I don't think you believe in the universe. I don't think you believe in
How
any of that
dare
stuff.
you don't believe in the universe?
Yeah,
I mean, not with the
I don't
Eagles.
see you as superstitious. I see you as just kind of matter of fact and grounded.
I can get into the superstition. To me, it is less about now. I used to be, as a kid, it was very much like, if they're hot, you're not moving your seat, all
Right.
that stuff. What I am now is if it's a game I care about, it's like I try to go out of my way to do things for good karma before the game.
Okay.
And like hope that the universe is going to
homeless.
Yeah, I respect
yeah,
that.
it's going to pay me back in that way. It's like I'm trying to pay with good deeds ahead of time, and
I
hoping
like
to get
that.
rewarded.
I do
Although
that
it does not
too.
always.
I subscribe to that. I do the same thing.
You get behind,
I respect
Bo at like Dunkin' Donuts or Wawa or something on game day. He'll buy you
Yeah.
something.
Pay it forward.
Donuts own a house. Yeah, paying for is right.
There's actually there's a famous story in my family. Now, I grew up in New York.
Yes.
And my mom was from Boston. Okay, so I'm born in '86.
Man, that's tough.
I'm 86. Wow.
I am 3 months old in the '86 World Series. My mom is a diehard Red Sox fan. They go to a party to watch the game. She leaves me with the babysitter in a Red Sox onesie, and my dad comes home from the party to wake up 3-month-old Bo so he can be witness to the Red Sox finally winning the World Series. And he takes me out of the crib for the 9th inning, only to find that the babysitter, a Mets fan, has changed me into a Mets jersey, and that is exactly when the ball goes through Buckner's legs.
Are you
serious?
So
the story is that it was all my fault. Yeah, the babysitter's fault.
Babysitter taking some liberties.
Really? The babysitter changing you to a Mets onesie?
Yeah, but honestly, I mean, you got to respect the game. That's pretty good.
Wow. That's wild.
That's outrageous.
That is outrageous. Buckner.
It's the last time she
Bo
babysit.
and Buckner. That's a new 30 for 30 twist on it.
Buckner was my fault. The babysitter's fault.
All right, let's get to the game and let's get to the locker room report. So Jalen speaks yesterday, and of course, what's he going to say? He's going to say, "I'm all right. I'm ready to go, and we're going to play." Are you hearing anything about the knee? Listen, it all comes down to can he move?
It comes down to can he move, and I also think that here's the thing with Jalen is that we can pick apart all his decision making and the sacks and stuff like that. One thing you can't criticize him for is he's tough as nails, right? And so even if he can't move the way that he normally moves, my belief is that he's going to tell them, like, don't get rid of the quarterback run game. Like we need that on offense. I'm willing to take some hits. there are going to be a couple keepers where I'm going to keep the defense honest. There might be a couple scrambles just to show it. And so it may not be what it always is, but I think there's going to be enough of an element where they think they can keep the defense honest. I do think that Jalen yesterday, I don't know if you caught Zach's question about this, but in the locker room yesterday, there's the players' lounge, which is just off the locker room, and they've got ping pong tables, dartboard, and a pool table. And I don't remember having seen this in a long time. Is that Jalen was playing pool? He's playing pool with Darren Kennard, the backup offensive lineman, and you could think that maybe this is kind of like, Jalen is always aware of who's watching. Is he just showing that he's so relaxed this week? He's not worried about this, that he wants people to see. Or my thought was, and I've talked about this before, Jalen is always so wound tight, right? And the only time that I have really seen him relaxed and embracing the moment and like having fun with all of it was the week of the Super Bowl before the Chiefs. Like he was really embracing that. And then he went out and played the best game that he's ever played in his life. And so I don't know, maybe you wanna read into that, like, oh, Jalen's all of a sudden he's back in the NFC Championship game. He's strutting around. He's feeling himself. Knee to the side. Jalen is ready for the moment. I don't know if you want to talk yourself.
I like that. Listen, I can get behind talking myself into that. I like that storyline. That's good. I like it. Yeah, it's good. How about you hear anything on Quinyon? I guess he's good.
Yes,
I mean, we know he's going to play, but that shoulder, like, should he be all right? Like, what are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, he said yesterday he's ready to go. There are going to be no limitations for him as a tackler or going up to get the ball. Who's to say if that will actually be the case? And, it is nice that the Eagles have Isaiah Rodgers as his backup. They have a very reliable starting caliber cornerback as a backup plan. So I think they're happy about how that stands. Quinyon said that, he was kind of hoping to go back into the game on Sunday, but was held out, but he feels ready to go.
That's big. I mean, listen, we know how big that was.
That's a corner, right? Like, as long as his legs are fine.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting. We talked to Dan Orlovsky. You're going to hear it a little bit. But one of the things we discussed was
I heard he loves his wife.
Blitz. What's that?
Yes.
I heard he loves his wife.
Yes, he does. Yes. Yeah, we'll find out the whole story about that. It's great. But he talked about blitzing Jalen, right? Like, we got this discussion of it because Fangio blitzed him a lot the second time. We saw Detroit blitz him a ton. And both times he made you pay. Like, I don't think you should blitz the kid.
I pretty much agree. And you look at over the course of the season, we talked about this on the show yesterday. I think Daniels is like 8th or something in the league in EPA per dropback against the blitz. Jalen's actually ahead of him. But over like the last 5-10 games, he's been elite. It is like he took the early season to sort of learn what to do against the blitz, and since then he's been nails. And his two best games, I think, were his last 2 best games against the blitz, and the best one was against the Lions. And so, I mean, that's not what Vic does a ton anyway. And so my guess is we're not going to see a ton of blitz, and you hope that with this Commanders team in flux with the offensive line after the Sam Cosmi injury, that the Eagles front 4 can win those matchups and get pressure with 4, and then you can sort of play zone behind that and maybe let one of the linebackers be there to be ready for Jaden Daniels break in the pocket.
Yeah, Bo, to touch on what you just said, Orlovsky actually tweeted out the similar stat. During Washington's 7-game win streak, Jaden Daniels has a 98.5 quarterback rating when blitzed on 81 plays. So pretty near perfect.
Yeah, that's I would not be doing that a ton.
Yep.
But I also think at the same time, I think there will be like, a couple third downs in this game where Vic tries to throw something at Jaden Daniels that he hasn't yet seen.
So ultimately, let's look at offensively their game plan, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to change much, right? I expect a couple down the field shots from Jalen that the weathers will be manageable.
I thought that was encouraging last week.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could see that. And look, here's the truth of the matter, too. Saquon has not been stopped. I mean, right? I mean, that run game has not been stopped.
People will say the Commanders did it, but Kenny Pickett was the quarterback at that time.
Well, that's the point. Like, and even he didn't even stop him, right? Like, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that all of a sudden the Eagles are gonna come out in the NFC Championship game and be dropping back every time. I think they're gonna know that
obviously. No, I'm talking
Saquon
about
is their ticket.
The success of
I think what I would like to see is just a little bit more variance in when they do drop back. And you talked about the downfield shots. I think it would be nice to see a few more of those. They took 2 last week. One was the Devontae penalty where he had the ball in his hands, and the other was the AJ Brown drop. Like that seems pretty efficient. I think we're going to see a lot of Saquon. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more of Saquon, in the flats as a receiver. I think those have been effective every time they do it, and they don't do it a ton. And then the other thing that is on my mind, that the one time I don't want to see them run the ball is these 3rd and longs, which we have seen in the playoffs. They're running these sort of give up draws, right? I call it a coward's draw. And Nick keeps referencing the one that they ran against the Jaguars where Saquon takes it in for a touchdown. So I went to look it up yesterday, and the Eagles on 3rd and 8+, so where you really can't expect to pick it up on a run, they run the ball more often than any team in the league other than the Colts, and they have picked up 1 of those 16 runs, and it was that Saquon play.
You say
right?
16?
And so
16 or 60?
16 times they have run the ball, and this doesn't include
longer.
This doesn't include scrambles. It's just handoffs or to Barkley or Gainwell, and they've picked up 1 of them. And so it is really a give up play for them. I would like to see them be willing to throw the ball, And when they do drop back on those plays, Jalen Hurts has been pretty successful. They're towards the top of the league in conversion rate, and they haven't turned the ball over on any of those plays since week 4. Okay, so let's go for it. Let's be a little bit aggressive on those 3rd and longs.
That's a wild stat because they are analytics people. That's like a 5 or 6% success rate. Like, it makes no sense.
It does make sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense in they want to play field position and protect the ball.
They want to avoid mistakes.
Yeah.
Right. But what I'm saying is
they had no problem punting it. Right? As long as just don't turn it over, don't create a negative play.
But they haven't had those negative plays. They're scared of it, but they haven't had one since week 4.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing. It's worked, right? Like it's worked.
He gives a smug little shoulder, like you say it works. He's like,
I know, I saw it. He's a smug guy.
Yeah, it's like,
yeah, I can be smug.
I mean, like in fairness, that formula,
it's worked, but like
putting the ball in peril has worked.
But I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I don't think that passing the ball on 3rd and 10 necessarily means putting the ball in peril. It could be those swing passes to Saquon Barkley, which, by the way, is what worked last week. Remember when they were in the shadow of their own end zone, 3rd and long, they do the little dump off to Saquon and he picks it up. Like I think those, even if it's relatively safe, it's a better bet than sort of the give up draw.
Yeah, I hear you. I like the name Coward's Draw. I like that.
Yeah, that is my creation. I'm very happy with that.
I like that. I
hear there's another creation. People in the chat, I don't know if this is true. They're saying ask Bo to do his Josh Harris face.
Oh yeah, I do a very good Josh Harris impression.
Oh yeah, I gotta say it.
You ready?
Okay.
There you go.
That's actually excellent. That's actually unbelievable, man. That's very good. I totally see it, man. I totally see it.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. I love
Just
it.
add like $11 billion and it's a dead ringer.
Yeah, you guys are twins. I love it. That's fantastic. Hedge fund Bo. I love it. So it sounds like you feel pretty confident, like, right? I mean, if I'm a gauge, I'm trying to read you here.
Yeah. Listen, it's one game. And I think if you stacked up everything, one team has the better quarterback and one team has the better everything else. And I think you should feel good about that matchup for the Eagles. It doesn't mean that they're definitely going to win. But I think if you played this game 10 times, I think the Eagles are winning it like 8 times.
I don't love that 8. I like 10 or 9. 9 out of 10. I feel more comfortable. But I don't think Bo's that confident. I'm not getting a confident vibe from Bo.
I feel pretty good. But listen, Jane Daniels is special. It's not crazy.
His voice went up a little bit. I feel pretty good.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's one game. It's a football game. You never know. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, but going into it, like you, especially when you are around a team, like when you cover a team and you're around the team and you get a vibe, man. You do. I believe that. I believe that you get a sense from them.
I would say now. Listen, I have not been in every single locker room like I was in 2022 and 2017. I would say my personal thought, and maybe this is a little bit retroactive, I don't feel vibe-wise the same way about this team that I did in 2022 and 2017. 2022, honestly, that felt like they were the best team in football. Nothing was going to stop them. And then, you play Patrick Mahomes and you take your chances. 2017 was more like that group was special. And the fact that they didn't back down.
Believed in in the miracle. And I still contend that thing was a blessing. It was like a football blessing.
I think enough people did their good deeds on those days
I agree.
to win over the football gods. This team, I don't necessarily, because there is still the hemming and hawing of like what's going on with the passing game a little bit, and honestly, frankly, they're just not in the locker room quite as often. They sort of are avoiding it a little bit more. So I don't know. I mean, vibe wise, I think they're fine. I still think that they're going to win this game, but yeah, I'm not gonna bet the house up.
All right. What's the story today? What do you got cooking? Because
Zach
today,
Berman?
right? Today is a full practice at the link.
Yes, full practice at the link. Zach and I will be here at 2:00, and then at 3:00 we're going to hear from Colleen Wulf. Get a little
I love
NFL Network
Colleen.
Philly perspective. So
Yeah.
that'll be fun as well.
Awesome. 2:00, we'll be watching as we always do, buddy. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, guys.
He's a dead right. It's a great
It's
imitation.
so subtle, but it's great.
It really is. It truly is. All right, this portion of the show brought to you by the Bet Park Sportsbook online casino app. Here he is. Let's go. Our man, Dan Orlovsky. Oh, man, look at this. I'm so excited. We have the OC of ESPN. The one, the
what's
only
up, man?
Dan Orlovsky. Danny boy. Good morning, my brother.
How are you?
We're good, man. It's all about, Championship Sunday. Hey, before we get into the Eagles talk and Hurts and Washington, the whole thing, great story. Yesterday was hilarious because your wife, God bless her heart, is a diehard Eagles fan. All right?
Maniac.
So you got to tell the story. What happened?
So there's two stories. So last week, because the game falling on Sunday, I think they played last week at 3:00, right? So game falling on Sunday, I was like, hey, do you want to go? Because it doesn't impact my ability to go and do work Monday morning. And I was like, you want to go to the game? She's like, no. I'm like, why not? She's like, if I go, we're going to lose because, we went to the Monday Nighter versus Atlanta. They lost. We went to the we went to a game last year. They lost. We went to another game last year. They lost. We went to the Phillies game in the World Series when they got no hit. We went to the Phillies game last year when the series started. So she's like, nope, not going. So I was like, babe, it doesn't work like that. Just so you're clear, it doesn't. But she 100% believes it does. But the other story is, your producer texted me like, hey, Dan, can you send me an email for Anthony's show for Thursday morning now? And I said, sure. And I start writing my email, which starts with Dan. And I'm hopping in the car. I'm running out to the house to go run an errand. And all of a sudden, I look down at my phone, I see Dan, and then almost looks like an auto type. And I think my phone is auto filling my email in.
Sure.
And I send it to your producer, and it says, I love you, babe. And so that grabs, or I love my wife. So it grabs my attention. I'm like, what? And I type out Dan again, and automatically I'm like, my gosh. So I walk inside, I go, Tiff. And all of a sudden I just hear like an 8-year-old laughing, like a childish laugh. And she's dying on the ground. I go, babe, I just sent, I love my wife to Anthony Argano's producer, and she freaking lost it, dude. So that's those two stories, man.
Oh my God, I absolutely love her. She's the best. And listen, she's a true Philadelphia sports fan because there's something here in the ethos that says, oh my God, if I'm here, they're going to lose, or there's something about it. It's part of our DNA, Danny.
Dude, you should, last weekend during the game, I think it was right after the safety. So our kids aren't big jersey kids. They really only wear jerseys that are Eagles jerseys on Eagles game day. And they were wearing, I think two of my kids were wearing the new, the Saquon Kelly Green jerseys that their uncle Brian Lesher had gotten them. And then two of my boys, I think, were wearing, my daughter might have been wearing Jalen's jersey and another son wearing an old school Randall jersey. And the safety happened. She lost her mind. She was like, Lennon, our daughter, she was like, take off Jalen's jersey, put on the Saquon jersey. To our other son, she's like, take off the 12 jersey, put on the Saquon jersey. Like, she was like, we got to all wear the same jersey, sit in the same place. I'm like, yo, you're out of your mind, man.
Tiff rules. I got to tell you, she rules. That's
Dude.
fantastic.
She's awesome.
Do your boys play, by the way?
My boys play. My boys play everything. My kids all play everything. We're old school, like play it all. They're huge Eagles fans. I have one son who's a maniac Eagles fan. Like, he's fired Sirianni 9 times this year. So yeah, he's 13.
I love it. I got 2 boys. My oldest plays freshman at St. Augustine in New Jersey, and then my little one is a quarterback. And they play everything. I coach basketball. They play travel baseball, the whole thing. And the little one's like, Jalen, he rails about Jalen. I'm like, dude, Jalen wins, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And he rails against it. I'm like, in my own house, I got to
Yeah.
deal with the Hurts hate.
Yeah, man. Yeah. You are not alone in that one. I got to throw the ball, Jalen. I'm like, there's nobody to throw the ball to.
Well, let's start off with that point because, I did the rounds this week, all around the country being guests and stuff. And, everybody says the same thing. Like, how can they win? How do they win with that passing game? And Danny, it's like the basic tenets of football, which are great defense, great offensive line play, great running game, and a quarterback that plays point guard. That's a basic tenet to win.
Yeah, and the reality is this: this isn't just a run game. I mean, it's a historical run game,
Yeah.
and there is the widespread belief, I believe, in their building of like, hey, stop it. Like if over 4 quarters, you got to stop it, and really nobody has, well, and I think that's the thing that is a little bit lost in this. I'm not trying to tell everybody that Jalen Hurts is Joe Burrow, but there is a
Right.
little bit of philosophically thinking. If we just look at the overall team, and you sit there and say, okay, we're going to run the ball well. We're going to play really good defense. How do we not lose? Like, or, like that's got to be your philosophy of like, okay, what do we do? Well, how do we not lose? Well, if we don't give the ball away, we're going to be in every game. And then we're obviously going to be able to constantly do what we want to do offensively. We're never going to get down unless we give the ball away early, stuff like that, down to an insurmountable lead. So I do believe that there is a little bit that we have to give Hurts credit to of valuing the football, not giving it away, not hurting the football team. And at the end of the day, like they do live in that world of you got to stop it. And no one really has.
That's a great point. It's a great point. And it's interesting because what illustrates it is the first 4 weeks of the season, right? They did at week 5 of the bye, they go in and they go, all right, well, who are we? What's our identity? We are a downhill run team. And we have a great line and the whole thing. And I give Kellen Moore a ton of credit. I love your offensive mind. I'm curious of what you think of the job that Kellen has done changing, right? What we saw the first 4 weeks into what they've become.
Yeah, Kellen's word has become disciplined this year. Kellen is a quarterback, obviously. So every quarterback wants to throw the ball a ton. And that kind of was his story at Dallas and LA. And a lot of people would kill Kellen because they would sit there and say he will become too pass happy at times. And he's really become a little bit of the opposite, where he's in many ways become a little bit, run happy. I'll share a text with you that I had with Kellen because I've known Kellen for a long time. We competed against each other in Detroit for a backup job. I texted him, I want to say sometime around October. I don't know what, sometime in October. And he came back to me with, I honestly think we could break the rushing record. Like he felt it in October that they could break the rushing record. And that just kind of, shows you what his mindset was. I think the way that they've, their run game is a lot to handle. I think that they, 2 years ago was heavy RPO. Well, the rules have changed it. Like you can't operate the RPOs in 2024 like that you did in 2022 because you're not allowed to have the linemen downfield. And the way that they've gotten into some of their gap stuff, where pulling people, the way that they use their size, on the interior is a big deal. The way that they got Cam on the pull, like Kelsey. So, I think he's allowing those guys to play at a strength offensively.
And I thought one of the most underrated moves that Howie has made was Becton and moving Becton in a guard. He's a beast. Like inside, my God, like that. You run over that right side. That's nasty, man.
Yeah, you're talking 650 plus pounds, Hall of Famer and first round talent. Becton was a first round talent. And so the size of their offensive line is something that, Hembo, who works with us at ESPN, gave me a stat, I think like 2 weeks ago. He said, and the way we phrased it was like, their offense is like an avalanche. At some point it gets started and you're not stopping it, because I think at that point they were minus 35 in the first quarter point differential. They were plus 174 after that. And so it is one of those things where like just that physical size eventually just wears on you. And that's the thing, the connectivity of football.
Yeah.
The size doesn't matter if you're down 28-17. Well, how do we get down 28-17? We threw the ball a bunch and Jalen threw 2 picks earlier, or a fumble or a sack fumble. And all of a sudden, like the connectivity of playing a certain way is a real thing.
It is. It's such a great point. I love the avalanche thing. I love that from Hembo. That's fantastic description of it. But you're right. It matches what they do. Matches their defense, right? It works because of what Fangio is able to become, and it's amazing when you mesh both sides of the ball. And what they do well, right? Like what they do well is they don't give up big plays, right? So they don't fall behind, like you said, by 2 scores. So it matches really well. I think people don't see that.
Of course they don't. We're still in even though football is really different right now than it was 5 years ago. Like 5 years ago, it was, air raid, bombs away, score 40. It's changed. It's gone back to what it was 25, 30 years ago. And so we want, like every game this weekend, what's going to be the most important thing? Washington, you got to stop the run. Philadelphia, you're going to have to stop the run in no huddle. Kansas City, you're going to have to stop the run against Buffalo. Buffalo, you're going to have to. It's just where we are in football right now. And I do think people, kind of lose sight of the connected element of football, how to win the game, what's necessary, how do you get your defense to play to their strength. When just from an offensive perspective, if you're watching another offense constantly like control the game and your defense is struggling to realistically stop the run, impatience becomes a very real thing for us because we don't ever get to control the game as an offensive perspective. So then we go chase plays, we chase explosives, we chase big throws. And then all of a sudden it's 2nd and 12, 3rd and 16, and you get the ball again. That's how it's all connected.
That's brilliant. And illustrating that was Saturday night with the Lions, like the Jameson gadget play.
Well,
I just felt like, and the game was not out of hand. Like they were moving the ball, and they even got away from Gibbs a little bit, which I thought they should have went back to.
Yeah, you panic. You panic because you see, and these coaches talk during the game like, "Hey, we can't stop them. We're not going to stop them." And so then you start to have to get into chase mode, or you think I got to go score 21 in 2 plays, or I got to score right now to try to gain momentum back. And again, when you're playing against a defense like Philly that doesn't give you anything, they don't give you many of explosives, you oftentimes lose the patience to drive the football down the field. Now, easier said than done, but you lose the patience, and then that's when that avalanche starts going.
And it's one of the things that would scare, I think, Eagles fans on Sunday, or should scare them, is Washington has great discipline and control. I mean, Daniels is ridiculous, so we'll talk about him. But what they do on first down, they win first down. They won first down against Tampa. They held the ball for 11 more minutes. They won first down against Detroit, and they're able to kind of grind it out. It's pretty impressive how their offense works.
Yeah, I mean, their offense, I think the hard part about their offense, and it's not just one thing. Number one, their no huddle matters. It does. And it's not the speed of lightning no huddle that maybe Eagles fans remember. Chip Cummings, they played it twice this year, but the no huddle matters. I think it matters a lot in Philly more than it does in Washington because that crowd noise. Think about it from a defensive player's perspective. The crowd's going nuts. They're getting loud. We got to communicate on the fly. We only got a short period of time. So I think that matters. I think the way that they can spread you out sideline to sideline for their run game is different. There's a lot of stuff in their offense that defenses and Philly just doesn't see because there is a little bit of college to it, and that's okay. I think it's beneficial for them. So there's a lot that they just throw at you that you constantly have to be on top of with your communication and the way that you're disciplined in your gaps and the way that you're fitting blocks. It's a difficult offense to contain right now.
What that position inside and out. I mean, you got a PhD in it. Daniels, at this age, I can't believe his calmness. I mean, his serenity in the pocket is unbelievable. You got to talk to that.
I'm not surprised at all that Jaden's playing the way that he has. I think back to being an under-recruited kid going to Arizona State and being a true freshman and playing the way that he did in the Pac-12. He beat Justin Herbert in Oregon when they were good.
Yeah.
And then he transfers to LSU. And if you've never been down there, it's a different world. And so
awesome.
You talk about like the ability to have to handle a situation, like you're going for, it's the same thing that Joe Burrow. So your leadership, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you work, it all becomes like a bigger thing. Goes and wins the Heisman. And when I studied him, Anthony, I'd say the two things that stood out were, number one, in the moment of panic, what did he do with the football? And he never panicked with the ball. And the second thing, his ball placement was the best in this draft. And I'll go back to Saban on Pat McAfee's show at some point this offseason when Saban said, he's the hardest player we've had to defend over the last 5 years. When one of the greatest football minds ever says that, it speaks volumes.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, God, and his ball placement is ridiculous.
Sick.
It's sick. It really is. He's a mouse hole thrower. It's amazing. And the other aspect of his calmness, and I'm with you, right? Like, Saturday night in Baton Rouge, or you're playing in Alabama. I mean, it trains you for that. But there's something else. I know he trains with the VR. Do you believe in that? Yeah.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I mean, I do think there's a part of it that's him. That's him and the way he was raised, and I'm sure the way he competed as a youth, and he's played a ton of college snaps. That again is in evidence. But there's definitely something with the VR that, there's reasons why football players and athletes practice. So we have experience seeing what we're seeing and what to do. And I do believe that VR, it's something he's done for years now.
Yeah.
And he's got a great comfort at what he's looking at.
Yeah, it really does. So how do you Sunday? I think there's a fascinating chess matchup. We talk about all the cliches about house money in Washington, the whole thing. How do you kind of match this thing up?
Well, I think two things. One, you have to win it if you're Philly. Outside of the obvious, to go to Super Bowl, there's the only place that you could have the conversation of where Washington is better as quarterback. Okay, so and you're at home. All right, so I think it's okay to say that. I think the second thing is, where's Jalen's health? This was the one game that I would go back to last year. I remember being on TV during the season, being on TV the morning after the game and said, I have not seen a defensive line do what Washington's done to Philly's offensive line. They beat him up. They got after him, and it was after the injury. And so, what's Jalen's health? How impactful is he? We have no word about it. I just asked somebody who's a little bit in the know, and they were like, I really haven't heard anything. So how because if he's hindered, I think that makes it a lot more interesting because that defensive line can tee off. And so that's a little bit of an unknown. How much does Washington sell out to try and stop the run? What we've realized is if teams do that, that's when the big plays, that's when the big runs come from. So do you want to death by 1,000 paper cuts or try to minimize those explosive plays? I think it really comes down to how well their defense can handle the no huddle tempo. I think it really comes down to how well their defense can, in the first time they played, this is not a blitz-centric defense in Philly. They very rarely blitzed, Jaded. And the last time they played, they blitzed them the most out of any time in the season, and he killed them for it.
Yeah,
and it would be shocked if they blitzed them more than 3 times this whole game. So I think if their defense plays the way that we've watched them play this year, Philly wins the game. But there is a big unknown with Jalen's health.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I mean, I didn't understand why Detroit kept blitzing, kept doubling down on it. Because he
don't blitz him.
He'll make it pay.
Don't blitz him.
Yeah, no,
don't blitz him.
You cannot. Sam Cosmi being out, their best interior line, best offensive lineman, I think. And he was able to go one-on-one with Carter, who's been such a beast. I think that's a huge question right there for Washington is what you're going to do at that spot.
Yeah, I don't think I agree. I mean, and Jalen's obviously been unbelievable. I don't know if I don't have the belief that it kills them a lot, in
Okay.
their 20-20 offense, because they're running their stuff. Like
Mhm.
they're just running their stuff, and they'll mask it a little bit. And the protection stuff, if you could get them, that's where Jalen's been like, the holy smokes, you might be the best defensive lineman in football. When they get into those pass situations, the thing is that Washington slides their offensive line and their pass protection mostly. So, you're constantly almost having to half a guy or beat a double team if you're Jalen. So I do think the cosmic injury matters, but I think their scheme masks it just a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. On the flip side, if Hurts is lacked some mobility because of the knee,
Yeah.
what do you expect from him in the pass game, right? Because we saw that when he got hurt and Pickett was in, and the threat of the quarterback not running, Saquon was stuffed a little bit. I mean, you're never going to fully take him out, but still, they had success in grounding him.
I mean, the pass game. So the pass game isn't. It's not Super Bowl caliber right now. There is the fair point of man. Like, does it need to be? Probably not. I would be shocked if, you go beat a Kansas City or a Buffalo with it. And so, I think that it's not going to change. It is what it is. There's a week or two left of the season. The connection with AJ and some of those one-on-one routes has to become a little bit more consistent. And I would say this, like, if I was in the meeting room and you're having a talk with Jalen and AJ, when we get one-on-one, I would look at Jalen and be like, you got to trust him. I know that there looks like there's color there. You got to trust them. And AJ, if we trust it, you got to make it right, And so they're not going to have a ton of opportunities to throw the ball. They're not going to be asked to do a ton. But when we get one-on-one, we got to make it work. Okay, like we're not going to go beat 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks if we get to the Super Bowl by not making it happen. So I do think that there's a reality where Jalen has to, while being risk averse, like you gotta trust him to go make a couple plays, and AJ's got to pay him off.
Yeah. I mean, it was an anomaly last week, that drop. That's a
Right.
touchdown. Hey, real quick on the other game, where do you line up on the Mahomes? And then everybody's talking about Patrick and the getting the calls and the fake slides and everything.
I get it. I get it. I see both sides of the argument. Patrick is an all-time great that is obviously going to do anything and everything to go win. You have to make sure that you don't take the bait either way. You can't take the bait and not make sure that you're close enough to him to impact the play. And you can't take the bait to take your shot and wind up with a penalty. Is it easy? Is it fair? Probably not, but it's the reality against that guy.
I got to tell you, I love that. That matchup, I mean, is just incredible. Awesome. And having like when Andy got here in '99, got very close with him, and Sean, who was terrific. I mean, that's such an epic. I don't know who to pick. I don't know. I can't read it.
Same. It's giant versus giant, man. You got history versus history. It's everything you want as a football fan, and I'm fired up. I'm fired up for that one. Both of them.
So take us into your house on Sunday. Where what do you guys do?
During the Eagles game, my wife doesn't do anything. She will sit there and just watch the game. She doesn't get up now unless she has to with the whole superstition element of it. But I watch there. I mean, obviously, even last week, because I picked the Rams. I'm dear friends with Matthew. I honestly thought the Rams had a very good chance to win. And when they started when he made that throw to Puka, she looked at me and I looked at her and I was like, I didn't say anything because I was like, oh, fuck, she's going to get so mad. So I just kind of watched the game and take it in and be a fan and whatnot. And it'll be fun. And then Sunday night, we just watch. We're fans. I get to be a fan.
Awesome.
I often get to be a fan because of work. So being a fan will be fun.
Danny, you are the greatest. You got to give Tiffany our love. All right. You are the great OC of ESPN, buddy.
I thank you, brother.
Thanks, pal. The great Dan Orlovsky. Danny, you're the best, bud. Thank you. I love
boss.
you.
I'll see you soon, man.
Definitely. See you, pal. It's terrific. We love Dan. He's a good buddy. We love Tiffany. I think even more.
Oh yeah, she's like my new favorite Eagles fan. I
Yeah,
think
she's fantastic. Hey, coming up, real excited, Joe Banner, who was at the forefront of all this stuff, right? Like we talk about the success of the Eagles in this century, right? Becoming, I'll never forget the words of the gold standard that, Jeffrey and Joe said, we want to be the gold standard.
Mm-hmm.
And all these years later, they've become the gold standard.
Yeah, quietly. I don't think we appreciate the standard they've become.
Yeah. So excited. We're going to talk to Joe coming up in just a moment, take care of some business. Let's tell you about the BetParx Sportsbook and online casino app. Yep. The BetParx app has you covered for Sunday's championship games. You can't beat it, man. Listen, Sunday. All right, Birds, 6-point favorite. All right, they're a home favorite, as you know, 6-point. The total's 47.5. So a healthy favorite, 47.5. What's the money line? Get the money line up there?
Minus 295.
295.
That was a hefty one, man.
That's nice. That bodes well, right? And in the Chiefs-Bills game, I was telling Danny, I don't know how to read it. I kind of like Kansas City, I guess. But, man, it's great. Kansas City, 2-point favorite. The total is the same, 47.5. Odds to win the big game. So if you want to play the Birds to win it all, $25 gets you 46.25. So you can do that. Washington is the big dog. 25 pays 200. So whether your team scores or not, there's always a way to win on the BetParx online casino and sportsbook app. All right, listen, you can get some skin in the game. While you watch the game, have some fun. My man plays the Baccarat. You're Baccarat, man.
Love it.
You got online the blackjack, live dealer blackjack and roulette and all the hot online slots. After the television shows like Peaky Blinders, Rocky they have the Squid Game slots. It's a lot of fun, man. They have everything else, basketball, golf, I mean, you name it. Download the app right now. Enjoy all the excitement and the casino from your fingertips. And new users, you get up to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down the first 24 hours. BetParx.com has all the details. You got to be 21. You got to be in PA, New Jersey, Maryland, Michigan, Ohio. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER.
And life is stressful. Sports are stressful. Fixing up your home is really stressful. So you can take that stress out of your life with our friends over at Ace Hardware Home Services. You know, the place with the store, Ace Hardware. Well, now they do home services. Got a leaky pipe? They're around the block with everything you need to fix it, including the person to do the fixing. Got a heating issue? They got a person for that. Got a faucet you said you'd fix last fall? They got a person for that too, because now they're not just the helpful hardware folks. Nope. They're the helpful home service and repair folks. From plumbing to heating and cooling, they got trusted pros to keep your house humming all year long. Ace Hardware Home Services, they're bringing the helpful home, the helpful you love from the store now to your front door. Visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at www.acehardwarehomeservices.com to get started on your next stress-free home project.
Ace is the helpful place.
Sure are.
That's right. This portion of the program brought to you by TrueMark Financial Credit Union. TrueMark.com/PHLY to learn about the credit union difference. All right. Joining us now, his imprint is all over this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Every game.
Yeah. So obviously with the Eagles and Howie and everything else, but also Andy versus Sean McDermott in the AFC Championship game. Let's welcome Joe Banner to the program. Joe, good morning.
Joe.
Anthony, good to be on with you, and I appreciate the kind words. I'm not used to hearing that kind of conversation.
Well, it's true. All right. Like, this is one of the reasons I'm dying to talk to you is, all these years later, and listen, I know what it was like. I lived it with you, right? Like getting beat up on the radio every day and the whole thing. When you guys uttered the gold standard, I look back now, and this franchise has become that goal that you and Jeffrey uttered back then in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of us would prefer that phrase was never used because it appropriately became a lightning rod. And, if we thought it through, but sometimes you're just talking and something comes out. And it was the goal. It was, how do we always thought in terms of the Final Four, Final Eight. How are we repeatedly and perennially in that Final Four to Final Eight grade? Because frankly, after that, the wind can blow the wrong way. One referee call at the wrong moment. So, but if you're constantly building a team that's in that range, you should be competing for the Super Bowls as they are now on a pretty regular basis. So but the phrase was probably a little bit not the best way to present ourselves. So I appreciate that time has allowed it to weather a little bit better than it did in the moment, but we probably should never have said that.
It did. I mean, it really did. Let's start with Howie, because, I'm looking at this weekend and the roads go back to you. So Howie is a young guy out of Florida who wants to get into the NFL, and you hired him. Tell us the story about how Howie came on your radar.
So Howie, to his credit, was writing a lot of letters to, at one time or another, every NFL team, and some very regularly. Like I was getting letters from him, it seemed like almost daily. Somehow I ended up with a conversation with Mike Tannenbaum, who at the time was the Jets general manager. And we actually realized somehow that we were both getting all these letters from this guy. And we actually had a pretty funny conversation. Is he driven or is he crazy? And we were both kind of afraid to meet him or get on the phone. But Mike finally called me and said, you know what, I'm going to meet this guy. I got an opening. It possibly could fit. What's a lunch? We joked about, doing it in public. Like we don't know who this guy is. Don't do it where there's nobody around. And he called me afterwards. He said, he's not a fit for my job, but he was actually pretty impressive. If you have a chance or you have an opening, interview him. So that's exactly what happened. I was not intending to meet him until I got that call from Mike. But then once I met him, I was quickly like, okay, this is kind of the raw talent that I like to find and try to develop. I mean, it's very driven, very fearless, absolutely in love with the idea of getting into football and advancing over time. He believed instinctively in some of the things that we laid in about like dominating the Lions as kind of the priority and how you build a team. And fairly quickly, I moved him into, I had people in that role where they were kind of assisting me theoretically, helping with some negotiations, doing a lot of research, but none that really clearly demonstrated quickly the upside they had over time. So that's what I was looking for that position. He hit it and happened to end up being right about it, but mostly because of his hard work and his fearlessness, which to me separates him from the other people in the league.
He's become the best GM in the game. And, you guys had such a handle on it. First, the cap, right? Like you want to talk about mastering the cap. I'm sure he got a lot from you when it came to the cap because of how he's navigated it. Like you guys did it perfectly, and you work with your football people so well. And I guess that was a testimonial to you and Andy and how you guys kind of had the front office set up.
Yeah, and Andy and I had a spectacular relationship for a long time. Last few months were a little difficult, but frankly, we're together 14 years. We were really, really close in every sense. We worked well together. We both had a lot of respect for each other, which is a lot of relationships in the NFL that really don't last that long. Even some successful ones, Holmgren and Wulf together for like 8 years. But after 4, at least everybody who's there tells you it was pretty rough, that they were kind of challenging each other. But Andy and I went into it knowing that both of us are going to be right a high percentage of the time, but we're also going to be wrong some of the time. So we never had like fights to do that. He had to do it his way or my way. And of course, he had final say, but he's much more collaborative than people realize. They refer to him sometimes as a controlling guy. And he is a very detail-oriented guy, and he does care about paying attention to every detail. But calling Andy controlling is a totally mischaracterization of him. He's very collaborative. I mean, I can't tell you how many times to me and other people he would say, it's probably not how I would do it, but you feel really strongly about it. I trust your judgment. I'm going to defer to you and do it your way. And, that empowers everybody working to work hard, think they make a difference, and feel a part of things. And, he would articulate that was part of his philosophy in management and leadings. And it was incredibly effective. And talking to the people in Kansas City, he's doing the same thing. So I think it was a big part of not only why we were successful, but how we had a 14-year relationship and still have a relationship that was, really, really strong. And I think it contributed to not only our success, but our ability to have fun doing it.
Go back to when you hired him. I mean, you want to talk about a hire that was outside the box that people are like, who? You're going to hire a quarterbacks coach from Green Bay? What are you doing? I remember the whole thing. First of all, I know how organized he was and how impressive, but what was the thing that you realized that this is our guy?
Now, we had a very precise list of like 5 or 6 qualities that we wanted to make sure the guy had who we were going to hire. And it was really studying. We defined significant head coach success as somebody who'd been to at least 2 Super Bowls. So when we looked at the qualities that those people had in common, they weren't really very football oriented. Some were offensive guys, defense, some were aggressive, some were, some ran the ball, some passed. There was really not something there. But when you looked at their character, the strength of leadership, which most everybody knows, that's pretty obvious. But for example, our second most important thing on our list was the ability to hire and manage really good other coaches. And in the interview, famous story about the book that Andy had, and he had every position graded 1 through 10 in terms of his rankings. Like you'd see a draft board. And as we went through some of the names, we felt like, this is not random. This is not fly by the night. He actually knows in tremendous detail, and had actually made a point of talking to a lot of those people to make sure he had them in the right place. So he fit a criteria we were using that was different than most, and permitted somebody who had never even been a coordinator to actually rise up and become the head coach, which to this day, you barely ever see. He's one of just a couple over the last 30 years where somebody has been able to take a less traditional path and still have somebody recognize the upside and not be afraid of the resume.
Yeah, you know what's uncanny is that you got John Harbaugh, right, who was a special teams guy, who goes from being a special teams coordinator to being the head coach of the Ravens. You know that staff that you guys put together at that time is all over the league. I mean, Andy's tree is a forest by now.
Yeah. And listen, that was one of the reasons we hired him, and it was one of his strengths. And, I'm proud and not hopefully egotistical to say some of the people, like you just mentioned, Harbaugh or Sean McDermott, they were technically hired before Andy got there. So we were building an organization where Jeff and I realized the key was the people we hired. It wasn't us. There's only so much you can do as one person. There's no way you can build a great football organization just by one person. Now, all the teams that are good football organizations, or great football organizations, do have one key person that drives the ship. So we were very much looking for that. Although we were comfortable with any model. We could GM-driven front office or head coach or kind of a mutual thing. We were open to all of the above, but filling in the right name was the big challenge. And that was where once we had this list of things we were looking for, it can be testing to work with somebody who's just so obsessed with every little detail. But there's absolutely no doubt that the coaches in the NFL that have been really successful are obsessed with every little detail. So the fact that Andy was clearly obsessed with every little detail was, to us, with a huge plus. When I talk to people that interview coaches, they like, how'd you even get into that? We didn't even talk about that. How'd you know he was so detail-oriented? But we were interviewing to our list of 4 or 5 qualities. So we actually discussed that at length. And once we heard how good he was at evaluating coaches and his philosophy of how to manage people, and then we saw how detail-oriented he was, I know for everybody else, it was like, what are you thinking? And we took a lot of heat for it. But for us, it was just like, listen, here's the list of things that great coaches have. Here's the list of things we just saw in him. They match. This really isn't that hard. It doesn't feel that risky, even though by definition it was.
One of the things that I think that people finally have come to understand about him is how great he was with his players. Like, he had a great relationship. He would let himself have fun with them. And, just the way he orchestrated the locker room, right? Like, where he had the player councils that would meet with him, and, whether it was a bye week, those little details, I think, really fostered kind of something special. I think that was kind of what you saw.
Yeah, and listen, he was very calculated about that. You probably remember, like, the George Hageman running around the field in the first year. He literally talked about, listen, in the first year, I'm going to kind of overplay my hand in terms of how tough I'm going to be on the players and what I'm going to show them, expect of them. Once that expectation is created, I'm going to settle back into somebody who you call a player's coach. And by that, he really just meant that he respects them, he appreciates them, he can care about them sincerely. He's always going to be straightforward and honest with everybody he's talking to. So he didn't do anything where it was kind of flying by the seat of his pants. He had thought through every single thing. He'd been preparing to be a head coach for a very long time. Where you could interview somebody, sometimes you feel, this guy's been scrambling the last week to get ready for the interview. Andy had just been thinking about how he'd saved, speeches to like opening training camp that Mike Holmgren had done for years. Now he was going to create his own version, but that kind of gave him something to refer to. So those were the things we talked about and gave us the courage to just say, you know what, I know it's not traditional, but this is the right move.
Did you ever have any kind of backlash in the sense of, the football guy thing, right? Like the football community coach thing, there was to this day, you still have, degrees of guys, well, I'm a football guy, and who's not a football guy? Having dealt with that early on and getting through it, you see kind of, and I think that's kind of what Howie's brilliance is that he was able to navigate that and show you that, listen, I know the game.
Right. And it's interesting because Howie's really the only one that totally broke through, who kind of had a non-traditional background like myself and him. People don't realize there are actually a lot more of us than people think. Like Brian Billick was this, George Young, the general manager for the Giants for years, was very successful. And there's actually a pretty significant list that people do now, especially fans, think of as football guys in that classic way. But people like Howie and I were kind of out of the club, and they really don't want to let you in. You can knock on the door, you can pound on the door. They really don't want to let you in. But at some point, and I give him a lot of credit for this, and obviously he went through a lot of heat to get to the point, he developed credibility within that group. It doesn't mean that everybody loved him. It doesn't mean everybody agreed with what he did, but he gained credibility within that group, which is invaluable. As you're talking about working with coaches and other personnel people you may be bringing in for someplace else, you got to spend all your time convincing them that you have enough credibility to be in the job you're in. You're wasting a lot of time. If you can get them to come in and presume that you know what you're talking about, you don't have to waste all that time. You can just get started on the work that actually matters. So it's been tough. General manager in Minnesota right now has a little bit of a similar background, not exactly the same. So hopefully, incredibly slowly, because it was 30 years ago that I started working in the league, and we started having success. I mean, even with Ray Rhodes, we made the playoffs 2 out of 4 times. We won a playoff game. We weren't satisfied, and so we moved on. But we were still 50% of the time in the playoffs and winning a game. So it's still very, very hard to kind of crack through that. And most owners, as they do their hiring. Now, in Jeff's case, he knew me, and then Howie became homegrown. So it didn't take that huge leap of faith that some teams think of when they hire this kind of non-traditional category. I do think you'll see more of it, but it's changing so slowly. It's kind of I thought after maybe 10 years of what we had done, like the first 10 years we were here, people would start to become more open-minded to people like myself and Jeff. But I think Howie's the first one that broke through, and he didn't even break through right away. It took a lot of skepticism.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, he got banished. You remember the whole Chip Kelly saga, right? And I remember going to visit Howie, and, Chip was like, why, where's he at? What's he doing? And he put him in the back room. And I mean, he basically was excommunicated for that period of time. You know better than anybody.
He was effectively fired. I mean, let's just call it what it was. And he was, looking for other opportunities. I mean, fortunately for Eagles fans and all of us, he didn't find that opportunity and then got a second chance, which indicated Jeff still had some respect for him, but at that moment felt like it was more important to appease Chip than it was to appease Howie. Look back at that and we go, whoa, what was he kind of seeing? But, it's interesting because Jeff is part of hiring Andy and hiring Howie, although, limited more with Howie, but also responsible for firing Andy and effectively firing Howie, which is, that's just, I've never seen anything like that. If you kind of look at the history of it and where we are today, it's kind of an interesting path.
It's wild. Hey, go back to how you first guys got started. And I think about that you got this franchise and now where the league is at and where these franchises are, how much these franchises are worth. I mean, the explosion of the whole thing. And you were there at the beginning. Like, you think about it, you guys stole that franchise when you think about it now to today's term.
Yeah, $185 million. I'm only saying it was already public. And Jeff just sold a part of the team that was valued at $8 billion. It was $8.2 billion. So, we have some few partners in the team that have been massively successful in their careers, and I'm not sure they've ever had an investment better than this. And they actually invested because they thought it would be fun, and they were lucky enough to be able to afford to put some money in to just have fun. But no one envisioned this. So I will tell you, Jeff, his family, and some of his advisors were very much against him doing this. But his vision was very, very clear. He says, over time, having a large number of eyeballs on something is going to become unique and incredibly valuable as media becomes more diffuse. And that's exactly what happened. He didn't stumble into it. Now, did he appreciate that it was going to go from 185 million to over 8 billion? No, of course not. But his not only getting in, but his reasoning for why, like in talking about this with his family, was this is what's going to happen. And the franchise is going to increase in value. And in the meantime, I think we'll do a great job running it. And it's exactly how it played out from a business, monetary perspective. He nailed it exactly right.
And he was also involved. Like, this wasn't just a passive, entity for him. Like, you guys, what did you guys do to prepare from the football aspect of it?
Yeah. This is going to sound, I'm not sure you judge it, but a lot of businesses in sports, the need and the desire and the comfort level of just doing how it's always been done is so extreme, it would be hard to verbalize.
Yeah.
So we were just bringing in kind of a fresh, it's like nobody in the league would have hired Andy at that moment. I mean, there were 8 openings at the time. Nobody else interviewed him. And Ron Wulf, he'd worked with Ron Wulf, Hall of Fame general manager, for 8 years. Ron Wulf actually hired the coach we fired and let us hire Andy without even interviewing him. So the experience, which many people think is valuable, is actually getting the league all blocked up with people doing it just because they'd always done it that way. So they weren't even looking at somebody that'd never been a coordinator. And that's just one example. I mean, we had very simplistic thoughts like, if you drop back and pass, and this is true 30 years ago, this didn't get true as they changed the rules and the game evolved, you'd average 7.5 yards per pass attempt if you were just a solid passing team. And you'd average 4 to 4.5 yards per run attempt. And we're sitting there going, why, if you're averaging almost twice as many yards just for calling a pass versus a run, is everybody in that time they were running more than they're passing? It defied common sense. So we just came in with thoughts like that. Then we got involved with math and analytics and some true professional people, first at MIT, then at Penn, then bringing in people in-house to really analyzing the game. And where were we doing things that the game I'm talking about were making sense, and where we've been doing things that were only happening because no one had really stopped and restudied what was the right way to do it. One of the reasons this team is so unique, because everything we learned at the time was pass more, especially pass early, get the lead. The league underestimates the importance. Almost 80% of football games are won by the team that's ahead at halftime. So you hear people, commentators talk all the time about how many fourth quarter comebacks this quarterback has. It's not really a very important stat. It's nice to have, and you want to have it if you can, so you keep your hope alive and an opportunity. But the truth is, 4 out of 5 games. Remember, that's more than everybody says, oh, if you win the turnover battle, you win the game. No, it's even more true, which that is a true statement, by the way, but it's even more true that if you're leading at halftime, you'll win the game.
You got to win the first half.
So Andy, came out throwing almost all the time, was very aggressive, wanted to get a lead, ideally more than 7 points. And then, get aggressive on defense, like Jim Johnson, blitz, use your foot, whatever you need to do. You got to get pressure on the quarterback. And that's the way you make sure you don't blow the lead. So the Eagles evolving into a team that's running so much and winning.
Yeah, Andy's script he was great at that. His opening script, proved exactly what you just said.
Yeah. No, and frankly, the team has carried forward that philosophy, so it's passed on. Andy's probably 5 coaches, 4 or 5 coaches removed from now. Now you get Barkley in there and just so dynamic. You're stupid if you don't adjust in some ways.
Right.
But they still know that getting the lead early is really important, and having the lead halftime is really important. And if you watch it close, you'll see they'll call plays and they'll build a team. I mean, one of the reasons we had depth at the defensive line, not just quality, was this notion of we're going to get the lead in the first half. We got to have the ability to make sure nobody can come from behind on us. And if you have a great pass rush and you have enough players that they're not going to get tired, it's very, very hard for a team to come from behind and beat you.
Well, that's why you guys always looked at corners and edge guys. I mean, D-line and corners. I mean, Andy used to talk about the edge philosophy all the time. Offensive tackles and corners in that whole shell.
Yep. Yeah, and listen, other than quarterback, I think we had defensive line ahead of all the other positions more than the rest of the league. And I think that's still true. And I think it's proven to be, a wise approach to building a team. So now they got these young guys that are stepping up. It looks like they're going to have a dominant defensive line here for a number of years again.
I mean, Jalen Carter, Joe. Oh, my God. I mean, how good. Oh, hey, just to bring it back, a couple things I'm curious, because I love kind of going back to I believe you go back to find out where you are currently. You're also big on sports science. And that was a big deal at the time. I remember Rick Burkholder, who is the trainer now with Kansas City, who was here for all those years. You guys were at the kind of forefront at a lot of that sports science, particularly in training camp and making sure guys weren't overheated. You had their temperature regulated through a pill that they had through your computer. That was a really interesting kind of piece of this recovery.
Yeah, and we backed into that. We realized that the teams that were playing in the Super Bowl every year were amongst the least injured team in the league. So we felt like, okay, the league is designed to equalize everything. So we were always looking for what is legal, but allows us to defy that kind of league attempt to make everything equal. And one of them came back, if you think about it, and you realize that most Super Bowl appearing teams have minimal injuries. Is there any way to improve our batting average when it comes to injuries? And they've absolutely mastered that. I mean, we were prioritizing that when I was there, but frankly, we weren't differentiating ourselves massively from the rest of the league when I was there in this category. Some of it, ironically, is from Chip, that they realized and was smart, and they've continued, which again is wise, because a lot of times in the NFL, you get rid of somebody like Chip, everything he brought to the organization leaves with it. They were smart enough to go, okay, wait, there's some things he brought that we really like and we want to sustain. So the idea of trying to stay healthier than the rest of the league was one of those things. And I think it's like 5 years in a row now, they've been in the couple of fewest injuries in the league.
Yeah.
And that's, if you're trying to win a Super Bowl, that's a huge factor in being able to do it.
Hey, one of the things I have to ask you, since we're back during that period, is the TO. You were a great negotiator. You won contracts. But the one thing I always wonder is, why didn't you try to extend him to make him happy, to kind of salvage that piece of it? Would you have done that over again?
This is a tough question. Just recap, because I think it's been mischaracterized at times by people. We signed T.O. We signed him to, remember, first he had agreed to a trade to Baltimore. They had a contract, everything. We had to kind of find a way to kind of wiggle into the thing and see if we could undermine that trade and make him available again and try to get him, which we did, and traded, frankly, very, very little to get him. And we agreed on a 7-year contract. It's $7.5 million a year. It sounds funny now. But at the time, that was in the group of highest paid wide receivers. So contrary to the perception, it was a full fair market contract. Now, in those days, we wrote a contract where, because of the signing bonuses appearing in the first year, usually the deal had a very high cap number in year one and then a very low cap number in year two. So over the first 2 years, you had about the average that both the player and you agreed was fair. So the issue for us was totally around precedent. So he was in year one. He just finished year one of a 7-year contract. And, we knew, because we've seen other teams do this, that if we open the door to redoing a deal after 1 year, which is unprecedented, nobody watching you or listening to you or you could come up with names of people, even, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. I mean, these players are not getting, new deals. And that was the fair market value. So, I mean, we feared the repercussions of taking a step like that at the moment. Now, you never know how much that precedent would get thrown in your face with other deals, or how many other players would say, wait a second, if you're redoing his deal, what about me? But that was what drove it at the moment. Obviously, we knew we were a better team with him than without him. We didn't want all the stuff that, blew up to have happen and then eventually have to get rid of him. The truth is, he went to the Cowboys and signed a contract for the same amount of money he was owed by us over the next 3 years. So the market, once he was free when he left us.
Right.
So he had 31 potential bidders, and they valued him at the same price we already had, on paper for him. So I still don't know. I wish that it had worked out and he was there, but I know there would have been at least some consequential feedback and blowback from other players at that moment and going forward. I mean, the Eagles are known for how they do contracts.
Yeah.
And as long as you're consistent with players, the agents will accept it. So if you're like, listen, you signed a 7-year contract, we're not redoing it till at least, say, 3 years. Or we're not extended, we're not doing anything. The agents get to know that, and it makes negotiating those parts of deals very easy. If it looks like you can be pressured into changing your mind, then all of a sudden everybody wants to hold up and get held out,
Yes.
get on the phone and scream at you. So we'll never know if the repercussions of doing something at that moment would have been as consequential as we feared. But that was the reasons, at least, why we didn't do anything. I think it's important to recognize he then went on to sign a contract with Dallas for basically the same price that we were already paying him.
Yeah, for the same money. Hey, Joe, would you mind if Baldy joined the conversation with us? Because
not at all.
We have when he's ready, just let him know because we have Baldy coming up, and I know he would enjoy this too. How did the Michael Vick thing happen? Because the Michael Vick thing was fascinating. How you got it was almost the perfect place to come here, and it was seismic at the time.
Yeah. So this is interesting, especially if you think about how good a coach Andy is. So we're literally now probably 20 years ago. Andy had a vision for a long time of what if you took the West Coast offense and merged it with a college spread offense? What would that look like, and who could stop that? So when Michael was sitting out there, Andy was immediately, oh my God, if I literally could pick the number one quarterback in or out of the league that could execute this potential West Coast offense merged with kind of a spread offense, some of the best of both of those schemes, Michael Vick's the guy. So that's what kind of started the conversation. And frankly, Andy had a conversation with Howie about it, who at that point was not in a significant position in the role. And I didn't know it, but after the fact, it was like, I want to bring this to Joe, but how do you think he's going to react? Do you think he'll be intrigued? Do you think he'll think I'm an idiot? What do you think? And they talked about it some. They both agreed it was a good idea. And then Howie said, yeah, I think he'll be okay, but you should just go have the conversation and see what he says. And I do love dogs, so there was an element of it that was difficult for me emotionally, and I knew it would be a very challenging PR situation, at least initially. But I was on board pretty quickly once he said that. And when he said it, he included people that he talked to. I mean, Tony Dungy was identified at the time, who had developed a relationship, and why he was confident that he deserved a second chance. Because we all thought some people deserve a second chance and some don't. So you got to pick the right spot. Somebody you really believe isn't going to go get you in trouble or get himself in trouble again. So I did a little research on the stuff he had told me about why he was confident, in Michael's future versus his past. And I was on board very quickly. Then we went through the same thing. How do we present this idea to Jeff?
Yeah.
Jeff is also a dog lover. He had actually multiple dogs. So, we went through that, kind of thought through the best way to present it. And Jeff initially was quite reluctant. He didn't say no, but he said, ooh, that's kind of tough. And, it's going to be a PR disaster. And how we know he's not going to get in trouble again, which is what Jeff generally does. He'll ask a lot of questions, make sure you've thought through things carefully and considered all the repercussions or benefits of doing something. So it took a little bit to kind of get him as comfortable as we were. But, after thinking about it, talking to some of the same people, we did feel confident that Michael had gotten himself in a good place. We were just all in for it. Happened to be an agent that I had a very good relationship with, so it wasn't that hard to do it very confidentially. And then we did it. Now, we were planning a very well thought out announcement that in the middle of a preseason game, all of a sudden the news broke. And we're like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
It was
so we didn't really get to kind of
against the Patriots, I think it was. And all of a sudden it was like the Eagles have signed Michael Vick. What? It was amazing. Hey, let's say a little to Baldy. I'd like to have Baldy join the conversation. Baldy, say hello to Joe.
Baldy, how you doing? Good to see you. Does that say old mastermind or O-line mastermind?
O-line mastermind, O masterminds down in Frisco, Texas. Duke Manuel runs it. It's good program. Train a lot of offensive linemen down there, Joe.
The right answer, really, though, being an older guy myself, that was both.
Well, that applies, Joe. We're both in that category. None of us are turning back the clocks of time anytime soon.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Hey, Joe, so Jim Johnson passes, and that was such a devastating moment for all of us. He was beloved, obviously. Was a great defensive coordinator. And then it was like, how do you replace him? And here's Sean McDermott today in Buffalo, right? One of the great coaches in the league. What did you see in Sean, and how did that come about with Andy and Sean and to make him the DC? And then what happened?
So Andy had been mentoring and developed Sean with the expectation at some point he'd be a defensive coordinator for a long time. And from the moment we first interviewed Sean, I think we all saw him as somebody with a lot of upside and kind of fit, who we were and how we were, the type of kind of very driven, very hardworking, high character people that we like to fill the organization with. So it really wasn't a hard decision on Sean and really all of those decisions were Andy. He'd ask us, you have any ideas of people I should consider and have any perspective on here, a couple of guys I'm considering, but there was no anything other than whatever in the end Andy decides. And as I say, he's much more collaborative than people recognize. So he'd ask opinions. We get to throw in some thoughts. So the hiring him was pretty easy. The one thing that ended up being relevant was at that time, Andy really did want to continue running the defense that Jim ran and felt like in doing Sean, we were going to be able to do that. And you may remember Sean's defense was quite different than Jim's. It was much more basic.
It's what you see
complicated.
Today. Yeah.
Yes. But so I think the fact that we were hoping for and expecting one thing, and then it came in a different direction, probably affected our perspective more than it should have. I mean, it's one of the things I look back at as a clear mistake when we let him go. We should have given him more time. And we thought maybe that was true at the moment, but at the same time, we were at a point where we had a really good team. We didn't want to waste. Again, we were wrong, but that's what we think at the time. We were going to lose time while Sean develops. And that was the reason we made the decision to move on. I think all of us would agree in hindsight that we made a mistake. It was kind of a premature decision, probably made for the wrong reasons too. It was more about the style of play we wanted, which, it was a mistake to overfocus on that. When you hear people hiring coaches now and they want to find this great offensive mind for Caleb Williams, go hire a great coach and let him figure out what the right minds are to put around a Caleb Williams. So, we had that attitude, but it seemed like with Sean, we kind of forgot that in the moment and didn't stick with him as long as we should have. And again, it was really hard because everybody liked him, everybody respected him. We all thought he'd be a head coach, someday, but I guess prematurely we moved on from him.
Joe, what did you see along the same lines? You had Steve Spagnuolo there too with Jim Johnson. What did you see from Steve back then? Because he was in NFL Europe. He was coaching over there, and he kind of grew into a position coach before he ever became a coordinator. What did you see early on from Spags?
Yeah, see, this was Andy knew Spags well, so he brought up his name. He told us the strengths and weaknesses. A few of us got a chance to meet him, and again, we were looking for super driven people, knowledgeable people, good teachers, and really good people. If you look at Andy's staff, and I think this is true for most of the winning organizations, you don't have people with a lot of egos. You don't have divisive people. You don't have people that are on the reservation or overly focused on their own self, long-term ambitions. So Steve seemed to have all of those things, and Andy was really comfortable with his knowledge. He correctly identified him as some of the players would really, really like and respond to and work hard for. And Andy loved to use. Andy does not describe himself as a coach. He describes himself as a teacher. So everybody we hired, that was the first thing he was looking for, is this guy, a really good teacher. So that was the thing that, got everybody excited about Spags. And again, he was a position coach at the time. But we also saw, we were always trying to hire, people ask Andy, why is Belichick's tree not worked out as well as yours? Because we were literally hiring people that we thought had huge upsides. And we missed some, but that was the agenda. Other people are hiring, I need a linebacker coach right this minute. Can this guy be a good linebacker coach? Obviously, we needed to check that box, but we were very focused on people that had the ability to develop and do a job much bigger than where they started. And, again, Andy drove that he really felt Spags had that. I think he proved. Frankly, he should be getting another chance as a head coach.
I do too.
Yes.
We both do.
Yeah, well, all three of us. And, I keep waiting for it. The Rams thing was not fair. They had one foot out the door and, he didn't get a long enough time there. Can I ask you about identifying talent? That inexact science. What have you learned about identifying talent? And what's, you saw Andy great at it, right, with quarterbacks and O-linemen, how he's become really, really good at it. What do you think? What have you learned about identifying talent?
Are you talking about players when you say that, or
yes,
these coaches in front of
players?
Yeah, I mean, when I got to Cleveland, and I could kind of reflect back on what we did right, wrong in Philly. Never got to see this executed, but the big idea that I had that we hadn't done, which is not a big idea or complicated at all, but sometimes the simple thing gets overlooked, was what are the 1 to 2 characteristics at every position that actually define success? Like at quarterback, the most frequent mistake is you pick somebody with a great arm and you forget that his ability to process quickly and throw accurately are actually the 2 most important things. So for example, a corner or wide receiver, people focus on speed as a huge thing, which you'd love to have speed. It's differentiating. But the most important thing a wide receiver is he can create separation and he's got spectacular hands. If you're going to be disappointed, it's probably because he's either not creating a separation or he's not holding on the ball when he should be, which is demoralizing in addition to not helping you win. So, to get more precise and intentional about that. And what I did in Cleveland, again, and had very little time to really implement to see if it would work out, was, when you start writing your report, the first thing you have to write about is whether this player has these. We all worked together, debated everything, agreed on the 2 qualities at every single position that they had to have. So if you start your report by writing those things, the other thing was we felt like the game had already moved to its passing and was going to move even further to its passing. So the other thing you had to write up right at the beginning of the report was the impact this play would have on passing, whether it's offensive, defense, alignment, a corner, as wide, whatever it was. But we were training our scouts to focus on the 2 things that identified success at each position, and then write up a report that started with and was focused on those 2 things. And the other thing was the biggest differentiator in the league. If you look at almost half the first round picks aren't as successful as we would have thought. If you analyze why, it's almost some intangible. I mean, watching tape is not as hard as some people think. You can usually, not always, tell who has talent and who doesn't.
Yeah.
But you can't always tell who's as driven as wanting to be great. Who's going to work the hardest? Who's going to be the most coachable? So I'm not talking about players that you're sitting there worrying about showing up in the newspaper on Monday morning.
Yep.
I'm just talking about the intangibles that in life separate people from being great, from just being okay. So if you can increase your focus on these key qualities and match it up with an increased ability to identify the intangibles that are required, like we were totally in lockstep on how smart player had to be, what their character was, how driven they were, how much time they spent in the weight room, all those kind of things. We had complete agreement in our personnel department and through the coaching staff that we were not picking players unless we could check those boxes. Now, listen, sometimes we didn't get all the information, so we made plenty of mistakes. But that was going to be our attempt, was to know everything we could about these intangibles. So I used to say to the scouts, listen, if you go to a school and you write up the wrong grade on his playing ability, we're going to double check you and we'll catch it, hopefully. But if you don't get the right character information on this guy, we're toast.
Yeah.
So I said, if you want to keep your job, make sure you don't miss character information.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to miss some of the write-ups. And we got ways of cross-checking it that hopefully between 2 or 3 people write up a play, we'll catch it. But do not come back here and miss. Tell us some guy's got a great work ethic and then get him in here. I don't want to bash him out, but that's kind of what happened like with the Watkins that got so many. His tape was actually good. At least we thought it was good. And it was across the board. Everybody watched him, Andy, offensive line coach, Howie, me, everybody liked him. But we would completely miss the intangibles and how they can contribute to his success or failure.
It's interesting, Joe. I'm going down to Mobile for a couple of days next week. And I love, to your point, I love when they talk about a receiver and they say, he jumps out of the gym and he runs fast, but he has inconsistent hands. Yeah. And as soon as I hear inconsistent hands, I'm like, well, okay, is he doing anything about it? Like, is he working on the jug machine every day? Like, what can you do to improve that? That's just to follow up on that. But, there's one position that the Eagles have had, starting with you, Joe, whether it was Trey Thomas, trading for Justin Peters, or finding Jordan Mailata. I don't know that anybody's had a better run at left tackle in this whole league than what you guys have had. So just go back to the trade for Jason Peters and what you saw, because he hadn't played a lot, Joe. Yeah. He was a tight end in college, really didn't play much. Up in Buffalo, Mouse Davis coached him for a little bit, or Mouse McAnally coached him for a little bit. What did you see? Because that's a Hall of Fame player. And nobody really knew that, but you guys traded for him.
Yeah. So this is a little bit of an interesting story, and one of the few times where Andy deferred, and we all ended up thankful because Andy's batting average and being right about things is extremely high. So what happened was, you got the story exactly right. He was basically a tight end. And we wanted, one of the jobs we assigned Howie was, we want you to watch preseason tape and see if you can find a player or two that you think could be developed. Maybe he's a practice squad guy, maybe he's a 52nd guy.
Yeah.
And come back with a few names of people that you think have that upside. And one of the players he came back with, and he just started to play left tackle.
Yeah.
One of the players he came back with that had this upside was Jason Peters. So then I sat down with Howie and I watched the tape and I said, you know what? I see just what you're seeing. I think we got the guy. Let's go talk to Andy. So we went to Andy, presented this to Andy. Andy watched the tape and he said, you know what? I see what you see, and I think he does have some upside. But we had just cut the roster, which is a process that takes a lot more time than its importance actually matches. You know, that 53rd guy rarely matters, but he can take up a lot of time and a lot of debate and discussion. And he says, we told all the players, I really don't want to change the roster right now. I don't really want to add anybody right now. You know, we can look at it again later in the season. So we didn't do anything. And he was I think he was still in the practice squad at that moment. So we could have just approached him, and if he wanted to, switch teams to us. So ended up, the year passed and we didn't do anything. And we all kept an eye on him and saw him really developing. But I think it was in year 3 or 4, he got into this contract dispute with the Bills.
Yeah.
And I was at that point watching it closely and had remembered kind of this history. So I then went into Andy and I said, you remember this guy, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, here's his current tape. And he's in a contract dispute with his guys. And it wasn't accidental that we had that series of left tackles. We were determined to find a great player at that position over and over. So he said, well, this guy's really impressive. He's, you know, and there were some character questions about him at the time. Nothing too terrible, but a few things. So he asked me to do some research. I actually called the agent of every other offensive lineman on the Bills. And I said, can you ask your guy, what is Peters really like? And, you know, we got it back overwhelmingly positive stuff. It wasn't perfect, but it put us at ease. And that was when, you know, I talked to Andy and agreed that we'd call the Bills and see if their tolerance for pain and the holdout they were going through was getting used up. And very quickly they said, yeah, we're open to moving him. And needed permission, called the agent and said, what would you be looking for? It was almost 20% more than the highest paid left tackle in the league at that point.
Wow.
And we were like, wow, we're going to have to give up picks and we're going to have to pay. Top guy in the league at that point was about 10. He wanted 12. And we didn't want to recreate this situation. So we wanted to be able to say yes to what he wanted. We didn't want to get into a back and forth haggle. So it was like, okay, he wants 12. We're going to do 12. So then we called the Bills and they said, you know, it has to at least include a 1. And at that point, I think we had the 24th or 26th pick in the first round. So we said, all right, we'll give you a first round pick. And for a while, we stuck at that. And they eventually came back and said, you know, we can spread it out over another year, but we need something else later on. I think we offered like a 4th and a 7th or something like that. That was a future. And that was how the trade got done. I called the agent and said, listen, we've agreed on terms with the Bills, if you'll do a contract. You know, we're okay with the 12, but I think we insisted it had to be like a 4 or 5 year deal. He wanted something a little shorter. So we said, we'll do everything you want, but we got to get the length we want, because we weren't going to go through all of that trade away a potential rookie who was no money for 5 years if we didn't know he had. So that was how it happened. We almost never had him because that moment that we could have added him in training camp, we passed on. But then a couple of years later, the opportunity came back, and fortunately we grabbed it.
Wow, that's wild. Joe, talking about organizational philosophy, the way to win, you talked about how you guys foresaw passing and how throwing it would be so important. The sea change now, we've seen everything cyclical in life, right? We've seen the running back come back, and we've seen the success of Saquon and everything else. Do you think you would still, or Jeffrey would be happy as Jeffrey better than anybody, as this run first team?
No. But he's very happy winning, and it's obviously working. So he's not going to tell anybody to change it. But it's not his core. It's not Howie's core. It's not any core. It's not anything that the math says is most likely to win. You know, we always used to say there are 100 ways to win, but there are a few ways in which the odds are actually better than others. And that was where the passing early to get the lead, create a defense that was really able to keep the lead. You know, that's where that whole philosophy came from. But you're too narrow-minded if you're not able to know that there are other ways to do it. And if you happen to get it back with Barkley, put him behind an offensive line that they have a smart scheme that even maximizes him within all that. The debate is it players or plays, and the answer is obviously both, even though some like to pick one or the other. So you put all that together with a talent like Barkley, the offensive line that they have, and although I'm still amazed by it, honestly. I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen some unbelievable running backs, all the way back to the Dickersons and Sanders and all the way up to today, breaking off 40, 50, 70-yard runs on a regular basis. Never seen anything like this.
No.
And he's a great running back, but I'm not sure I put him ahead of some of the greatest running backs that I've seen, again, over the course of their whole career. But he just, I mean, you're at the other 30 and you have a real chance to score.
Yeah.
And on a run, not like a bomb going through the air.
What's amazing, too, is they crowd the line of scrimmage, right? So you crowd the box, and which makes you even more vulnerable. And I think what Howie did with Becton and having him inside makes that line just ridiculous. I mean, that line is of all the great lines that you've had, this is probably the best. This could be the best.
Yeah, I agree with that. And part of it is, it's amazing they find a 7th-round pick who can play left tackle. And Baldy, I remember right at the beginning when he started playing, you were just, I think before everybody else, you're like, this is not this guy's going to be a really, really good player before anybody had seen anything.
But I knew, like, I came out of Dallas, Joe, where we would constantly take basketball players and try to convert them. And, and we had some success over the years at various positions within that organization. It's one of the things, they brought in so many free agents. You got a good look at them in training camp. But the one thing I saw from Jordan from the beginning was the natural ability to really play the game. He wasn't a robot. He wasn't just like tunnel vision. He actually saw the field in his movement because, as a scout, you study the movement of each individual player. How does he move? He never looked awkward. To a guy that never put the pads on or anything else, he had natural movement for his size. He wasn't a waist bender. He was a knee bender. He had good feet. He learned from Lane Johnson and Jason Peters, like his stance and his how to kick step, and that came very naturally to him. It was pretty easy to see that he had a real chance early on. And then, of course, I mean, it kind of. I want to get into something else with you, Joe. But the one thing I saw Jeff Stoutland a couple weeks ago before the Jason Kelsey show, and I was talking to him, and one of the things that's interesting about him, Joe, is he has all his offensive linemen on the field before the game. They all walk through things up until 2 hours before kickoff. And all the guys that don't play, practice squad guys or guys that might be the sick, they definitely get an hour's working. But I've seen him with Dickerson and Malata for an hour before the game, walking through stunts that might happen, looks that they might see. Some guys are in the locker room going through it, maybe with their iPad or whatever else. But I don't see any other team doing what Jeff Stoutland does before a game. And I think it really pays off. I think a lot of these things that happen in a game, stunts, blitzes, like they see it all the way up until kickoff. I think it carries over to the game.
Yep, no question about it. None. He is a difference maker. And that's another thing. I mean, we went from the first offensive line coach we had when Jeff and I got there was Bill Callahan.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Stout. So you can see, what we cared about. We've also had a lot of really good defensive line coaches. And frankly, those two position coaches can make the biggest difference with their players. I mean, all the position coaches can help their players get better. But it's especially true. I think offensive line over everywhere, and then second, at least in my opinion, would be defensive line. So when you have that history of fighting like a Malata and having, let's say, amongst the best couple of line coaches in the league, it's a dynamic combination, and it's not by accident. It's by intent. So.
I got to ask you one, because people are talking on the chat. There was one instance that hurt Dawkins. Joe, tell us about the decision of letting Brian go.
Yeah, we didn't really decide to let Brian go. It just happened. So we weren't that stupid that we decided to let him go. It just, I mean, listen, first of all, I don't say this because I've always been kind of part of my job there was to kind of take the bullets, but that I was certainly part of that decision, and I consider it something I regret. But people thinking that I just made that decision don't really understand the way things work at all. But I guess kind of the mistake with Brian had actually come to me during the season. And he said to me, came into my office, sat down, just the two of us. He said, listen, I really want to finish my year in Philadelphia, my career in Philadelphia. And, I know my contract's up at the end of the year. Just make me a fair offer at this point in my career. And, I want to stay. And let's find a way to get it done. So we had re-signed Brian when he was 33. And at that point, he was 35. So we actually offered him 20% more than we had paid him in the contract when he was 33. And just based on the conversation I had with Brian, we thought, oh, this is going to get it done. In fact, we thought it was probably more than we had to do based on how he had said it. Honestly, his agent was a little bit difficult, and his agent and I have talked about this, after the fact. And the agent once jokingly, it's actually at Brian's Hall of Fame induction, the agent actually was sitting at the same table for dinner. And I think he's part truthfully and part sarcastically said to me, "Was it more my fault or yours that Brian didn't get into his career here?" And I just kind of rolled my eyes at him because obviously I think it was him, and he probably thinks it was me. But he was slow to get back, and then he was hard to reach. And before you know, we're approaching free agency, and then it made sense to see what else was out there. And what ended up happening was Denver offered him a deal, let's say for the first 2 years, because at that point, that's what Brian thought he'd play 2 more years. The amount of money we offered him over 2 years and the amount they offered him over 2 years, they offered him slightly more, but it was very close. But they had structured the deal where a lot of the money was in year 1 and a small amount was in year 2. And we had structured the deal so it was about the same in year 1 and year 2. And just thinking that Brian was likely to play the 2 years and all that, we thought, well, this isn't a big deal. It turned out it was a big deal because, maybe he would only play 1 year. And if he only played 1 year, he was going to make a decent amount more money in Denver than with us. If you played 2, as they say, the numbers were really close. So at that point, for whatever reasons, despite the earlier meeting him and I had just one-on-one, he chose to go to Denver, and we all to this day feel awful about it. I was the one having the conversations with the agent and the one that had the one-on-one meeting with Brian, and so I've asked myself many times, what did I miss? So what did I misread? And I certainly wish that hadn't happened. Brian and I have had a few conversations, and Brian and I have a good relationship. I mean, not long after that happened, him and his wife had a ceremony to recommit their marriage, and invited me as part of many people. So we always had a good relationship, and we've talked about this after the fact. In fact, we were both working at ESPN probably 5 years ago, and our times overlapped. So we had a chance to talk through some of this stuff. And I think he feels bad that he left. I know we feel horrible that we must have put ourselves in a position that at least became a possibility, even though he really wanted to stay with us. But even in hindsight, I'm not sure what I could do. Obviously, we could have had offered more money, but having beaten his previous contract by 20% and the first 2 years ending basically being the same he offered Denver, it doesn't make it obvious that, if we just threw a bunch more money at everything, it would have been fine. So, I feel the same way as the fans do. It's terrible and sad and really disappointed that he didn't finish his career here. But that's the details of at least how it happened. You can think about whatever you want, but that's the how.
Joe, it's that time of the year when there's a lot of teams out there looking to rebuild. I mean, whether it's the Jets or Jacksonville, whatever.
Hey, Baldy, real quick, one second, real quick, because I want to let people know that if you're watching on Samsung, the X1 Xfinity platform, if you're watching on Roku, we continue on YouTube. Go ahead, Baldy.
So I want to ask you, Joe, it never seems like we have enough good architects that know how to build a team. You and Andy did it from the very beginning, along with Howard, along with Jeffrey. But, I mean, it seems like there's always a shortage of architects. We keep turning that position over as much as quarterbacks or coaches or anything else. What is it? Why is that? Why isn't there? I mean, Jason Light came out of your system, and Mike Borgonzi came out. All these guys are out there right now trying to rebuild, and Jason's done a good job in Tampa. And Baltimore seems to have those guys, starting with Ozzie, that can do it. But why isn't there enough good architects that can lay the plans? Does it start with the ownership? Joe, where do you look at that?
Well, this is an interesting question, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I used to say we probably are working in a profession that more people would want to work in than any other profession you could name, and there's a shortage of talent.
Right.
Those two things shouldn't be said in the same sentence. I did an interview recently. They said, "Well, what do you kind of think was your best contributions to the places that you worked?" And interesting, based on your question, I said first was, I think I'm really good at identifying and hiring people and developing them. And I think the record kind of backs that up. Yeah. I said the second thing was being part of identifying the right team building philosophy, which you can watch around the league. The teams that kind of replicate that, which starts with you got to have a great quarterback and you've got to dominate both lines. Yeah. It doesn't win you a Super Bowl, but it gives you the foundation that gives you the best chance to win the Super Bowl. That's how we thought about it. And I can't understand why, we call it a copycat league, and yet the teams that have won a lot have some similarities in what they've done, but it's not getting copied very often. Yeah. And I don't understand that. I mean, obviously you can have different IQ, you have different backgrounds, you work with a different owner, but the idea that people are still, you get a lot of lip service to, oh yeah, you got to win both lines of scrimmage. But when you actually watch what people do, you're 100% right. There are very few people doing that. Listen, same thing. We started obviously negotiating contracts early before other teams did. Yeah. It was obvious quickly that was a good idea. It literally took probably 15 years before most of the league started copying it. I mean, a couple of teams started copying it quickly, but you're saying, why isn't anybody doing, the same thing? So I don't know the answer to your question. It shouldn't be this hard. There's certainly models of success. That's part of what we copied. Some of it was things we thought of, but some of it was things we copied. I mean, the idea of get the lead and then build a defense, especially a defensive line, you can't lose it, came from Bill Walsh. Yeah. We didn't figure that out. And we got it, by the way, when we hired Ray Rhodes. He told the story. He said, well, what was it like working for Bill Walsh? He said, well, it was good most of the time. I said, what does that mean? When was it bad? And he said, if Bill Walsh got a lead in the first half and the defense lost in the second half, you would deal with an absolute lunatic going crazy and ripping your throat out. Yeah. And that was where we started to think, well, that makes sense. If you get the lead and the team that wins that game is usually ahead at half and blah, blah. So we started copying the philosophy behind how do you build a team that achieves what Bill Walsh identified as the way that gives you the best chance to win. So it's a mystery to me. That's the other thing that's a mystery to me is, we were the first to hire a head coach who had never been a coordinator. And it was Andy. He's going to go to the Hall of Fame. He's arguably one of the top coaches in the history of the game. Why is nobody copying that? They're not only not hiring the next Andy, they're not even interviewing the next Andy.
Look at John Harbaugh.
Right.
Look at John Harbaugh.
Yeah, I brought that up earlier.
You're special teams, Joe.
Yeah.
He's going to be a Hall of Fame coach. And I remember when John was debating whether to follow his brother through the college ranks. Yeah. Because the Duke job was open. He came to me and he said, Baldy, can you help me get an interview at Duke? The job is open. And I said, I'll do whatever I can here, John. And he didn't know if she'd go through the college ranks or if he'd get an opportunity like Bisciotti gave him in Baltimore. Yeah. But yes, I mean, because this is what makes me laugh, Joe. And I'm hearing it right now. Well, if we can fix our quarterback, we're going to be good. Well, I'm like, great. Well, what about the other 52 guys? Can you lead those men? Where's the leadership and the vision? And it doesn't have to be a coordinator, to your point.
Yeah. No, and listen, that's, I mean, you just said it all, in a nutshell. And, the league had in their head, I never forget Pat Moriarty, who was the cap guy in Baltimore, called me about John. And they really, really liked him in the interview, but they were just so skeptical that a special teams coach would be it. I talked to Pat and we finished. He said, would you mind getting on the phone with Ozzie? And I said, no, by the way, that's the damn history with John. We had multiple meetings about whether, because I, at that point, hired a lot of people. He said, how do you look at me? If I went to college and I was successful, because my goal is to be an NFL head coach.
Right.
I just don't know which is the better path to get me there. And we had that same conversation. Should he go to college? Should he stay in the NFL? By the way, that's when we moved him to the secondary coach. They said, okay, if that's your goal and we want to help you, we should move you to the secondary with the hope that you soon will become a defensive coordinator here or someplace else. And that was the path. Of course, he never got to have to be the coordinator. He went straight from, being the defensive back coach to being a head coach. Also, never a coordinator in the traditional sense. Obviously, most of us consider special teams head, a coordinator, but a lot of people think of him as the offensive defensive guy. No, I lived through the exact thing you did and had the same conversation with John. And I never had any doubt with John either. if we needed a coach, I probably would not have helped him. At least tried to help him get the next job, because we all thought he's going to do a great job. I don't know why everybody's so skeptical about this.
Looking at today, I'm curious, what do you think of Sirianni? As someone that has had so much success with these coaches, how do you assess him?
I think this is a great kind of mini study in sociology. I mean, he does not look the part.
Right.
He doesn't carry himself as if he's the guy. He doesn't seem to be doing things that account for the success, but he is. It's time to just admit it. He is. So, and it takes people in general a long time to overcome their initial impression, which a lot of time comes over appearance. So if you think of a classic NFL head coach, it doesn't look like Nick. If you think about how he carries himself, I mean, think about the really good coaches. They all go out of their way. And by the way, all the people that came from Philly, the Andys, Sean McDermott's, the Sean Payton's, John Harbaugh's, they're very even keeled during the game. You think like, Jesus, get fired up almost sometimes. But no, that's the role, and that's not Nick. So you're seeing, wait a second, I'm used to seeing a really good coach who's very calm on the sideline. I'm used to not seeing the kind of interactions I see. Nick speaks a lot with his face and his expressions.
Yeah.
That's very rare for a successful head coach. But at some point, get over it. He is that really successful coach who's doing a really good job. And it's taking people a long time. Listen, 10 games ago, people wondering if Nick was going to make it through the end of the season.
Yes. And you look at his record over the 4 years.
It's unbelievable.
It is. I mean, it's historical what he's done.
And by the way, some of that started with the initial staff he had, which has already produced multiple other head coaches.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, he picked that. He deserves
Jonathan Gannon, credit. Shane Steichen.
Yeah. And, that was, again, I know what the Eagles look for in a coaching search. So they talked to him about what are you looking for in coaches you're going to hire? And do you have any names you can attach to that? They don't care less about the name. They'll care about the why. Like, why is that the person? Why are you attracted to him? That's a very, very important part of a coaching interview with the Eagles. Again, not the name. I mean, they love to know the name, and they're obviously going to evaluate what they think of the name. But they really want to know, and the Eagles have been doing this for 30 plus years, is why is that the name? Like, what are you looking for in people? What do you think is going to drive that coordinator to be really successful? And if you get the why wrong, you're probably not going to get hired as their head coach. Because we always thought that said, and the Jeff and Howie that are still in those interviews with the same people that were developing this philosophy. If you don't have a really thoughtful why, and if it doesn't make sense, in other words, it's just not demonstrating common sense, clear thinking, you're going to be in trouble in that interview with them. You're probably not getting the job. So, and Nick turned out to be right. The first staff he hired was great. Now, he's having some challenges, I think, although made a huge step forward this year in replicating the quality of that first staff. But I still think they have a really good staff, and they didn't hesitate to make changes when they didn't think they did. That's another thing in the NFL is rampant with. Ironically, there's a lot of criticism of owners for firing people too quickly. I actually think there's more examples where they waited too long than moved too quickly. Like, look what the Giants are doing right now. Look what Dallas almost did. These are, the Bears waited too long. The Jaguars waited too long. I mean, Brocky was there for 5 years. There was no evidence that he was going to get them. So there are obviously examples where you fire somebody too quick, but I actually think there are more examples where you actually wait too long. Eagles don't do that. I mean, one of their great strengths is they make a mistake, they're objective enough to recognize it, and then move on. We used to say, a mistake isn't that costly if you move on from it quickly enough.
Yeah.
It can hurt you for the minute, but it's not like people say, well, if you draft a quarterback in the first 10 and you get it wrong, you're screwed for the next 3 to 5 years. That's true if you let it be true. But it's not true if after, say, 2 years, it's the wrong guy and you move on.
With how we did with Carson Wentz. I mean,
Carson's a perfect example.
I mean, you think about how interesting it's been. You finally breakthrough, right? It's the Super Bowl, it's everything. And then the turnover of Doug and Wentz quickly, and then right back at it with Sirianni and Hurts. I mean, that's pretty miraculous.
Right. And even if somebody else evaluated Sirianni as going to be a great coach and thought Hurts was going to be a great quarterback, they would have still been trying to fix Wentz. There's almost nobody that would have given up on him based on how he had played when he was at the top of his game.
And the fact that they had just given him a contract, Joe.
Right. Yeah, and they had to eat the contract on top of it. And by the way, amazing that they managed to pick up a couple of meaningful draft picks at that point in his career for him. I mean, just outstanding negotiation. Because you get to the point where I was in lots of these situations as the very team in the league. They were really down to one option. When you get to one option, most people panic and just take the best deal they can at that point. Because what if that one option goes away?
Right.
And the Eagles just acted like they had 5 offers and just kept sticking to it, saying no until the deal got to where they wanted it to be. And then they made a hell of a trade.
Yeah.
But it starts with the willingness. This is why people ask me, like, what do you think is the one thing that separates Howie from other people doing his job? I say fearlessness. It isn't evaluating. Most of the evaluators in the league, the good evaluators, are all good and they're pretty close. But so many of them paralyzed either by fear of the owner or fear of public perception or their own longevity. But the Eagles have never been that way. I don't think we were that way when I was there, and they're absolutely not that way under Howie. They make a mistake. Let's acknowledge it. Let's find the next guy, and then the pain isn't too bad.
You know, it's interesting because they made a mistake this year with Bryce Huff. They paid him a lot of money to replace Hassan Reddick, Joe.
Yep.
And, you know, based off of really 1 year of production where he's a part-time player. And really, you could tell Vic Fangio wasn't a fan. I mean, he wasn't a linebacker. He was a pass rush specialist. It took him about a half a season to figure it out. But once they figured it out, they said, this Nolan Smith, let's develop this kid. This kid's got movement. He's got speed. Like, he's got toughness. When they made that move, and they said, and I don't know what's going to happen to Bryce. I'm not here to run him out of the gym, Joe. But, like, it's clear that they're much better defensively with Nolan Smith and the development that he's showing right now. And, you know, they might have to eat that money. They might have to make that mistake. And I feel like that mistake will go away and nobody will ever talk about it again.
Right. You know, one of the philosophies that we had and they still employ is if you're trying to fill a need, which we tried to stay away from, you know, literally doing that, but sometimes you have to. The best way to do it is throw a lot of darts was the phrase we used.
Yep.
So you wonder, Eagles took a left tackle in the first round. Why the hell are they wasting any more resources on another left tackle? You know, they have a good defensive end. Nolan Smith was already in house. Well, this is just so important. So if we have to throw 2 or 3 resources, like we would draft somebody high, we'd draft somebody later, and we'd even sign some undrafted free agents if we had a position that we needed to fill. And we just know we're going to be wrong 50% of the time, even in the first round. So if we really need to get a top tier left tackle, let's just throw a lot of Bryces to that. And we don't care if we're right about the undrafted free agent of the first round draft pick. It doesn't matter as long as we were right on one of them. We couldn't care less which one we got right.
Right.
So you're right. So they got a Huff and they got a Smith. That's how they're thinking about it. If they're both good, that's a phenomenal problem.
Right.
At least one of them that was likely to be somebody we like and can develop into somebody that can make a difference. So if Huff comes back, great. Then we get 2 of them.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, they still got a really good player, a really productive player in the position.
You guys
so if you watch what they do, these are all kind of this. They're doing this intentionally. They're not like stumbling into, oh, it's so lucky that they had Smith because, you know, Huff busted, or at least in his first year busted. No, they're saying, listen, we got to have a great rusher on that side.
Yeah.
We got Graham here who can play maybe 30% of the plays. We got to get another 1 or 2 guys to be a stud on that position. So instead of just going, well, we already got Smith in the building and counting on that, they go, well, let's have Smith and Huff. And if we turned out to be so right that they're both good, this is a home run. That's when we drafted Cobb and we still have McNabb. That was the logic. You know, Andy loved Cobb. Well, you know, over 3 years, you'll find out whether you're right or wrong. But at the time, he loved Cobb. And we're like, you know what? And we were like, well, what will we do with Donovan? He's still playing pretty well. And we said, you know what? That would be the best problem we've ever had if we have 2 really good quarterbacks. We'll figure that out. But if you really believe in this guy, and Andy's record on evaluating quarterbacks is mind-boggling. It's not just the ones we pick. If you sat in a draft room with him,
I mean, I remember how you fleeced the Dolphins out of a second-round pick for AJ Feely.
Yeah.
You know, those are let somebody else have it.
Those were good moments. But yeah, that was another example of, you know, throw some extra darts at it. This is the most important thing: left tackle, pass rushers, quarterback. Let's not just count that we're going to hit 100% the one time we try to fill this need. Let's assume we're going to take a couple of shots to hopefully hit on one guy. And that's still how they're, you know, building up these key positions that way.
I mean, look at how he hit a home run in the draft with Quignon and Cooper DeJean. So you get 2 elite corners. I mean, 2 elite defensive backs I mean, that's probably the most impressive thing we've seen in years.
Yeah. Well, by the way, the defensive tackle is another example. I mean, I personally think that Williams should have been starting over Davis the whole year.
Yeah.
But
he's a better player.
That's another example, though. They were pretty strong at defensive tackle. They get to the third round, they got a guy they like. It's a very important position, especially be able to rotate. So the late in the game, when you're trying to hold on to the lead, nobody's tired. Take Williams and develop Williams. I mean, this is corners the same thing. Because all the way back when we picked Lito Shepard and Sheldon Brown, we still had Troy Vincent or Bobby Taylor playing at a decent level. So
and Michael Lewis was in that draft too. Yeah.
Although picked him over Ed Reed. So
right.
I'm glad
you brought that up, Joe. We didn't.
I was going to say,
up.
I'm glad not everybody remembers that as well as some of the other things. But yes, that's what we did.
At least you're right.
The player, there was no Ed Reed.
What was the challenge like of Philadelphia? Right, like go back to the beginning. Right, we were still living off the Buddy Ryan, that whole team and everything, and the challenge of Philadelphia and who this city is and we all are, and what was that like?
Overall, extremely positive, but certainly included some two-edged sword elements to it. You probably shouldn't be running the team or a general manager or the head coach if you don't have thick skin. I get accused of the otherwise, but I have very thick skin. I survived 18 years doing it and, being whatever. But I will tell you, and Baldy could tell you this, anybody who's been part of the league, when things are going well and you just have this incredible energy and passion and it just feels like everybody is right in the huddle with you. It is just so much fun. It's just such an indescribable feeling. So yeah, there's some rough edges that at times can be difficult. In my case, much more upsetting to me, my family hearing things. At times my son coming home from school and you just want to figure out how to protect him, but it's really not something you can do. But the benefits of the joy and the fun, especially since we did have a fair amount of success and got that feeling pretty regularly. People forget we came in, the Eagles fight song had been shelved for like 15 years.
Yes.
We're playing in an old stadium. So, we were doing a lot of things to try to take advantage of what we knew was this just incredible passion and love for the team. Just frankly, when I went to Cleveland, I thought, well, this is the same thing. These people just got to get unleashed and then they're going to go absolutely crazy. And so for me personally, and I don't think anybody there would disagree with this, some moments that were difficult, but on balance, massively more beneficial to have that passion, even when it comes with the criticism, than to play in some of the markets where it's pretty passive.
Yeah, I agree.
Not even close, by the way. I can't imagine anybody who actually experienced both that would disagree with that.
Joe, the thing that has changed, honestly, you're talking about just the fan base, is how these fans travel now. Like Eagle fans, I was in Brazil this year, Joe, and there was like plane loads of fans going to Sao Paulo, Brazil. They took the stadium over. They're doing these Eagle chants down there in Brazil, like only one fan. I mean, the Steelers are great. There's some really good fan base that travel. But Eagle fans have been traveling, Joe. They take over Los Angeles. They take over Tampa. Like they bring their passion to these away games now where it feels like a home game for the Eagles.
Can I tell you, I know when it started, and Joe will remember the Monday night game in Miami. Do you remember that, Joe? Stadium, the Eagle chants, there were 25,000 Eagle fans in Miami, and it became a thing of let's travel and look at you remember on the radio, we would look for the schedule. Oh my God, where are we going? Let's go. And that game, that Monday night game against Miami, we took over the stadium.
I remember it vividly. I had an interesting experience because I live in Florida now, but my kids are in Philadelphia. So I'm in Philadelphia quite a bit. And I was flying home from Philadelphia back to Florida, not realizing the Eagles were paying. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. The Eagles were playing. So I found myself in a plane. Everybody in the plane had an Eagles jersey on. Everybody was singing the chants. And I'm saying, oh my God, how did I not realize this was happening? But so I experienced the traveling part, not a part of the team. No, but that's absolutely it. And after that, we actually made a partnership with a travel agency to facilitate, ended up being a huge business for them. They became like the primary, this is a long time ago, I don't even know if they're around anymore, but they became the primary packager of away game travel for the Eagles. It was, I think other than playoff games, that first one in Miami they're referencing was the most fun. And we played like we were playing at home, and the team just caught the energy bug there and just went crazy in that game.
How do you see Sunday?
I'm going to give you a very technical answer to this question, and I don't know why no one's noticing this, so probably not broadcasting it to Washington. The Eagles are in a very interesting situation. They're one of the only teams I've seen in 30 years that is much, much more effective passing against a nickel defense than they are any other defense. And if you watch like the first Washington game, they get shut out for the first 27 minutes.
Yeah.
And Washington played a lot of 5-man lines and mostly 4 defensive backs. Because you get out of 4 defensive backs, you start putting in 5 or 6 defensive backs. There's nobody to cover tackle Barkley once he goes through the line of scrimmage. So my very simplistic answer is I still think the Eagles are a little bit better. I'm worried about Hurts's mobility. Daniels has played 7 great games in a row. I don't care if you're Manning or Brady. After you've played 7 in a row, it gets hard to not at least have let's say, an okay game versus a dynamic game. But I do think if Washington comes out and plays that 5-man line and plays a very limited amount of nickel, they'll at least have the best chance we see out there. The Ravens did the same thing for the first 23 minutes of the game. They also had the Eagles shut out. And for whatever reason, these coaches have taught since they probably were playing in junior high school that you go to nickel if you're expecting the other team to pass. Obviously, you want more defensive backs in the field. So it's counterintuitive. But if you look at the Eagles' stats, their success against nickel, both running and passing, is just unbelievable. I don't ever remember, and I never studied this stat that closely, so I assume there's some exceptions. I don't remember seeing a team that was better when passing against nickel than they were passing against base defense.
It's interesting, Joe. The Eagles change up to a team that they think is going to run either by formation with 2 or 3 tight ends or down in distance. Their change up is to take Zach Vaughn and play him outside and basically play a 6-man front and put, where Oren Burks or whether N'Kobe, whatever, as a lone backer. And I can't believe the teams haven't really attacked them when they're playing that style. The change up is so obvious. Like it jumps out at me that this is the time to throw the ball and not run into that front.
Yeah. No, I agree. So listen, I think coaches and scheme matter more than most people do. And I think this game, especially because there's only one defense that has had even moderate success in slowing down the Eagles. And that's this defense where you start with 5 on the line. Doesn't mean you're rushing 5 all the time. Sometimes you drop it. There's a lot of things you can do off of it. But I think the key is what is Hurts seeing when he breaks the huddle? And I think if he sees 5 men on the line, it's not always obvious when you have that who's covering who. So it slows him down just a little bit. It gives you a little better chance of stopping an RPO. So I think if we see early in the game Washington playing some base defense, even in nickel downs, that would worry me that it's going to be a lot tougher game than it probably looks like on paper.
Yeah, that's fascinating. How do you approach Andy and Sean in the second game?
I hate watching football games when I don't have somebody to root for, and I don't have anybody. I actually have both teams to root for in that game. So I've been agonizing over, not that who I root for matters at all, but I feel like I want to decide who I'm rooting for and decide. I lean towards thinking Buffalo win this game. I just think they're so determined at this point. I do think Kansas City is still excellent, but not quite as good as they've been the last few years. But I won't be shocked whatever the outcome is. In either case, you got somebody that I worked with for a long time, really good people, really good coaches. One of the two will be in the Super Bowl. I'll probably end up rooting for Sean just because Andy's been there so many times at this point. But they both deserve it. They're both really, really good people and really good at their job.
Last thing, where do you see the league going? You've always been a visionary to that point. It's so huge.
You mean beside an 18-game schedule, Cuz? That's coming.
I think the answer is we're kind of seeing the next phase, which is dominated by quarterbacks that can both run and pass. And the guy that's primarily a runner and the guy that's just primarily a passer is going to really struggle again. He can win because there's no absolutes. But if you want to have the best chance to win, you have one of these guys that can't throw and is mobile. I think the intelligence and ability to process quickly is not going to change. I do think the fact that we're seeing more running and more successful running makes sense because defense started to focus a little bit on smaller and quicker linebackers that could cover, a little less emphasis on playing the run. So I think that makes a sense. I still think, though, over time, the defense will adjust back. And then the old thing I referred to with the history of, an average pass being so much more successful than average run. But I do think it's going to take a little time to play this out. We're going to see more movement towards running, more successful running, and then some adjustments by the defense, mostly in terms of getting back to bigger players instead of faster players. Although if you can find both, that's where you hit your home runs. So that's kind of my very loose.
Well, one thing to just piggyback that, Joe, like the NFL can only take what the college game is giving you.
Yeah.
So you're watching Notre Dame playing, Riley Leonard's running and Will Howard's running. Like you're watching these games and all these quarterbacks are running. You're not seeing any Tom Brady's in college right now throwing the football. So we can only take what they give them, and we'll see. I mean, Caleb is a great runner. We'll see how long Jaden can stay healthy doing this style because he never slides. And he better learn how to slide pretty quick. He's gonna take one of those shots one day. He might be a little slow getting up like he did against Carolina this year. So, but and I think what's happened with this mobile quarterback, Joe, is it's really changing the way you rush the passer right now. I see more rushers. I believe Jalen Carter can beat anybody one-on-one, but the way that he rushes, he could win easily by swimming and clubbing and all the stuff he's capable of doing. But I see him just taking guys and walking them right back to the quarterback and keeping these guys more in the pocket and not letting them escape and do their thing.
Yeah.
Your cage
well,
rush.
we got 4 teams left, and all 4 of them have team quarterbacks that, and hopefully Hurts is healthy, but we have 4 teams left. All 4 of them have quarterbacks that can run the ball. And if you went back around, you still had an overwhelming number of the quarterbacks who could do both.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense. You don't really have to be very sophisticated about it. You're trying to figure out how to make it hard on the defense. You present a quarterback that can do 2 things really well. It's going to be much harder than stopping somebody who can just do, one thing really well. So I think that's the most immediate thing. And some of it's a reflection of the defense switching. It's hard to have a linebacker now that can't cover.
Yeah.
10 years ago, if you had a linebacker that couldn't cover, it wasn't ideal, but you could still have a really good defense.
You could take a guy that liked to chop the axe, Joe, and just run him in the A gap, just blow it up. That was a pretty good option right there back then.
Yeah. Well, remember how Jim used to crash Trotter into the center to blow everything up?
Blow it up.
Yeah.
That's it. He didn't really have any intention of them blowing everything up. And something good will happen if we blow it up. That was basically Jim's philosophy. So,
won a lot of games that way.
Yep.
How does the college game now and the dramatic changes, it's got to help only because guys are staying longer and they're more seasoned?
You mean in terms of like the recruiting and the NIL and all that stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I think there was absolute need for something to kind of be fair to the college players. At least to the extent I understand what they've done, I'm not sure they came up with the right answer. And again, I'm not talking about the quality of the game, just the fairness of who's getting what. How can we keep a lot of teams competitive, a lot of fans hopeful and excited? I hope that they'll, be in this moment for 2 or 3 years and then do a real honest look back and get some cooperation, because I do think the agenda should be, the game was great, but we need to do something to give the players a little more equity in the whole success we're having. Hopefully in a couple of years, somebody's open-minded to look at, okay, was that the best way to do that? And if not, what are some other ideas we can consider? Because I think having a lot of teams that are really good and not having it become just about the money is good for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe, I got to tell you, I absolutely enjoyed this so much. Thanks for your insight. And listen, take a moment on Sunday and feel good about what you accomplished, because Sunday, your imprint's all over it.
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that. And I will do that. One of my regrets of my career was just being so driven that I didn't pause often enough to enjoy it while I was doing it. And I think most people in the league would tell you that they look back wishing they had paused in the moment even more. But I very much appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. Great accomplishments. Thanks, Joe.
Take it easy.
Banner. What an incredible time.
Thank you, Joe.
Take it easy, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Baldy, final thoughts on Sunday? Well, I guess Baldy already left. I was going to give him the final thoughts.
Thoughts? I mean, look. I said 2 weeks ago that I thought the Eagles would go 4-0. Now, Jalen's injury is, it's real.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it's going to curtail them. I know this. Washington is going to score. So you're going to have to, I mean, what they did to Detroit is real. But I know Jalen won't put the ball in harm's way the way Jared Goff did last week. And so they're not going to give him great field position and pick sixes. It's not going to happen.
Do you
He'll
worry?
take a sack. He'll take a sack or a safety before he gives him a pick six.
He showed you that, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just can they stay with Saquon? Can he make? I believe AJ is going to be a factor in this game. He was. Marshawn Lattimore couldn't cover him in that last game. In fact, Kenny Pickett, as soon as he came in the game, all he did was feed AJ Brown.
Yeah.
He caught the first 4 passes and a touchdown as soon as he came in the game. So I do think AJ has got to be a much bigger part in this game than we've seen so far in the playoffs.
Yeah, the only thing that would kind of worry me is if Washington started off hot and took, the Eagles, it's amazing, but they haven't been behind, right? Like they haven't been behind by 2 scores. And, they've been such a great job as being in front. And we talked with Joe about winning first halves and how you win the first half, you're going to win 80% of the time. And they do.
Well, I feel like both teams have a chance to start fast. Washington started fast against Detroit. The Eagles started fast, obviously, last week. I mean, if they start fast, maybe we get an entertaining track meet, the way we saw in that Detroit game. So I think, styles make fights. Like if it starts fast and it becomes this track meet, like can the Eagles keep up if they have to, or vice versa?
Yeah.
Without making mistakes. That's the key. Can you play fast like that and not make mistakes? And that's because really Baltimore's out because they made mistakes. Houston's out because they made mistakes. The Rams are out because they made mistakes. The teams that got bounced last week, they all made mistakes. So, and the teams that advanced, they didn't. And that was the difference in all the games.
Yeah, fascinating. Sunday, you got who you got in AFC?
I'm never going against Andy and Patrick in Spags. Never. I think Buffalo can do a lot of things in this game and make it fun. And I'm not going against them, regardless of how sluggish at times Kansas City's offense has looked this year.
My brother, you're the best. I figured you would like. I had Joe.
Oh, it was great. Joe's great, man.
I love that stuff.
He's a thinking, like he did so many great things in this organization for this league that, and we're watching the benefit of all of his beliefs right now in the playoffs. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah. Great stuff, brother.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy, buddy. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, brother. There he is, Baldy.
Man, that was great stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Could have listened to them talk for a day.
I mean,
so insightful.
Well, that's
about everything.
It felt like you got a window into the past.
Yeah, it was fascinating stuff. Hey, just Clarence Hill Jr. He's one of the writers at the ALLCITY DLLS.
Yep.
He is saying, look for the Cowboys to cross the finish line on hiring Brian Schottenheimer no later than Friday, possibly today.
Wow. Kellen comes back.
Yeah.
Schottenheimer. That's wild.
It is.
Another next generation. Another next generation.
So wild.
Hey, before we go to ad break, can I just plug something real quick?
Yeah.
So right now, since it is our playoff season, we here at PHLY are doing something special for the diehards.
Oh, great. Tell us
right
about
now, you can, for a limited time offer, you can become a diehard for only $48.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
That's less than $1 a week.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting
it's
total
less than
access.
$1 a week.
And all of our insiders that do such great work.
Fran Duffy's breakdown.
Oh, my
his
God.
draft
First of all,
report is going to be ridiculous.
Is worth 10 times that.
Yeah.
All right, what he gives you.
Yeah.
And then you got Zach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Bo. And, of course, all of our great work.
There's no
Charlie
Flyers
on the
covers like there is
I mean,
here.
are you kidding me? How about Kyle and Devon and Derek on the Sixers and the stuff they're giving you? Rich Hoffman and his great work.
And I know what some of these other sports sites are charging, and the coverage is nowhere close, and it's 3 to 4 times what this diehard is.
It's a great deal, so make sure you jump
good
on
stuff.
it because it's only happening during the playoffs.
All right.
So get on it.
I like it, Andrew. I like it. All right, let's tell you about a couple of our friends, and then we got to give a game ball, and we got Rite Aid Back in the Day moment. as we want to thank Joe Banner and a lot of fun with all of our guys. Dan Orlovsky was fantastic, so it was a lot of fun today. Let's tell you about the BetParx Sportsbook and online casino app. It's got you covered. They got you covered all the way, baby. That's right. Birds 6-point favorite against Washington. Total 47.5. Doesn't become a track meet. That's what Baldy said.
Baldy's leaning over.
Yeah, Baldy said Washington's going to score, which means the Eagles better score, which means it would then go over. I think it's going to be more of a deliberate game. I think you're going to see more running. The Washington deploy more of that sugar huddle to kind of control the ball. So I kind of lean more under.
First defense is better than that banged up Lions defense.
Yeah. Kansas City 2-point favorite against Buffalo. Look, we talk about, I mean, that game. I think that game has a chance to go over 47.
I would agree there. Yeah, I like the over there.
Yeah, I could totally see that. By the way, for the big game, the odds are out. You can bet on the Birds, $25, wins 46-25. Got everything, right? Basketball, hockey, Fly Guys, Rangers tonight. You like Flyers tonight?
I do.
Yeah, to go into the Garden.
The Garden's made for this team right now. Is on a heater.
Yeah, they're playing well. I like the Flyers, orange and the black against the Rangers. The BetParx app has it all, including all your casino games, live dealer blackjack, roulette, craps, all the hot online slots that you want, jackpot, all that stuff's right there.
Love a jackpot.
Here you go. Download the app
like
right
jackpots?
now. You new users got to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down the first 24 hours. BetParx.com has all the details. You got to be 21. You got to be PA, New Jersey, Ohio, Michigan, Maryland. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Tell us about some Glad.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to all you guys out there with some thinning and receding hair. There is hope. If you don't want to wear a hat all the time, Glad Hair Restoration by Morgenstern Medical is the answer for you. Established by the late Dr. Paul Gladys, now under the direction of renowned plastic surgeon Ken Morgenstern. The two of them shared a remarkable bond. They worked as colleagues on research projects. They worked in the operating room. They were friends. So what makes Glad Hair Restoration by Morgenstern better, you might ask? Well, it's the same peerless approach to care, same expert team. Each member of this trained team brings 30-plus years of industry experience, and hair restoration is all they do. They can help you during all stages of hair loss with leading-edge treatments for prevention and restoration, including laser light therapy and non-invasive TED treatments. Each patient receives a complimentary one-on-one consultation to pinpoint your best course of treatment, and a caring patient advocate walks with you from the first phone call to the last follow-up visit because they know this is an emotional and challenging decision. Glad Hair isn't just about restoration. Nope, it's about innovation. Their breakthrough treatments really do dramatically change lives. Change your hair, change your life. Bald is now optional. If you want to improve how you look and how you feel about yourself, Glad Hair has the right treatment for you. Regain that confidence. Visit gladhairmctr.com or call 610-980-4000 to get started.
All right. Time for the game ball that we think, the player that we believe will have the biggest impact. Game ball proudly presented by our friends at Xfinity Mobile. Join the millions who have switched to one of the fastest growing mobile services. Look, A.J. Brown, it was interesting because Baldy talked about it. It looks like Jalen's going to need to throw it, right? Kenny Pickett went to A.J. a lot in that second game.
That he did.
We talked about Lattimore versus A.J. Brown. I got to go A.J.
Ooh, that's a good pick.
Like that. I'll go with you with A.J.
Yeah.
That's a good ball.
It'll be a good game if A.J. Brown gets a game ball.
The brain took his over.
Oh, yeah?
Yardage, yeah. I like that.
I mean, we should feel good as a fan base if A.J. Brown has an over game.
Yes.
When
what's the stat when he gets 100 yards, they win? I forget. There's some stat about when he scores and, it translates. Of course, they win. Their record is they win all the time anyway.
Anytime he plays, they win.
Yeah, it's true.
Unless Kenny Pickett's quarterback.
Exactly. It's the truth. I thought what Joe said about Nick Sirianni was interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
He's grown on me.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't look the part. He doesn't act the part, but he wins.
Time now for the Rite Aid back in the day moments.
All right, this one needs very little introduction.
You don't want the music?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure.
We gotta go to the music.
I jumped the gun. Yeah, I jumped
this
the music.
This is an authentic process.
That you did.
Need the music.
My bad.
Yeah, we're going back.
VG song.
It's only 1:30.
Bang.
We're going back. We're going back.
It's a 3-hour show today.
We're going back. Back in the day with Rite Aid. Yeah. All right, we're going championship theme. Few greater moments than the Wilbert run. Let's take a listen to Merrill call it.
Let's do it, man.
Second down and 10. The Cowboys with 6 defensive backs. Jaworski gives off inside, running with Montgomery up the right side. Left 30, 25, 20, 15, 10. Touchdown! Wilbert Montgomery! Montgomery exposed on the right side, and the Eagles had scored first.
Okay.
Jaworski
Wants to do this. That was a Saquon home run.
Sync it up to that.
Yes.
They synced up the LaShawn McCoy is also very similar to the Saquon.
But that's a home run ball. Like the Wilbert run is the ultimate 42-yard home run ball.
Yeah.
And it's a Saquon home run.
Yeah.
I mean, I did. And Joe did talk about that too, which is it's uncanny that we've seen those kinds of runs. We've never seen home runs like that.
No.
I mean, this is long ball stuff.
So consistent. It's like
unreal.
I just expect it. Won a game.
It's incredible.
We're going to get a Barkley run in this championship game
Yeah, you feel
that we're
me?
going to be remembering
so,
for
man.
years to come.
I hope you're right.
Yeah.
Just like that one.
We deserve it, man. He's been amazing. I guess he is the finalist for Offensive Player of the Year. Zach Bond, the finalist for Defensive Player of the Year.
Wow.
And both Quinyon and Cooper are in the running for Rookie.
That's a good draft.
Defensive Player of the Year.
I mean, Zach Bond signed to be like
Dude,
a special
Howie,
teamer
I
or
mean,
whatever.
one of the reasons why I really wanted Joe on was to talk about all this stuff and how we found Howie. And we learned that Howie was a stalker.
yeah.
Howie was a stalker.
I love that story.
It's a great story that Joe Banner and Mike Tannenbaum are talking about how Howie was so crazy, like wrote letters all the time that they go, is the dude crazy or does he have
Like if
something?
you're going to meet him for lunch, do it in a public place so
Right.
there's witnesses.
Like, are you kidding me? That's not gold. Amazing stuff.
Hey, you know, I was going to say, Frazier, his pants are so
They're
short.
hiked up. They're
when he
hiked up
sits.
because I'm sitting.
There's too much calf. Like when you sit, you should not see calf flesh. It
Yeah,
should
we
be, when you
see
got
over
long,
the sock.
their
The
hikes
sock's
are pulled up kind of high, and then we see this calf.
There you go. Look.
Yeah,
Thank
Joey,
you. Much
Joey
better.
Marone, what do you think of those,
They were hiked
those
up.
pants? They're short too.
Your calf cannot be shown unless you're wearing. If you're wearing the low socks, sure, but you're wearing high socks.
No,
then we
he's
see the
wearing
calf
long
on.
shorts.
We were doing so good, and then you had to break that up. All right.
Now that I saw them, you're right, BJ.
Oh, man.
Just trying to focus
Are they
over
football
here.
guy pants?
Yeah, they're football
no.
pants.
No, that's soccer guy pants.
All right. Frage, you did a great job.
Great
today.
job.
Yeah,
Great job,
thank you.
dude. Great job.
Here,
Excellent.
super early.
Yeah.
Nice work.
So we had to take Dan early because he's got TV. So Dan's like, hey, 6:45. Frage is here bright and early, 6 o'clock. Get everything set up. Joey Marone helping. Great job, Andrew. Excellent.
Kate
Excellent work.
Red wasn't know if you went through a growth spurt recently.
Yeah, I did.
Look like my Anthony. All right. Everybody, that's going to do it for us. Thanks for hanging with us during an extended program. Tomorrow, Football Friday. Oh, I'm already nervous. I'm nervous. Thanks for hanging, everybody. We love you. We'll see you tomorrow.
We all silly like the mayor.